With fall in full swing, more moments call for more comfort. Mack Weldon's got all the essentials for comfortable, easy-to-layer clothes designed for cooler days and timeless style you can count on. Their new Ace line, inspired by their best-selling sweatpants, combines everyday comfort with long-lasting and effortless looks. Not flashy, just classic, always in style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. Fall into comfort with Mack Weldon's Ace collection. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code MAC25.
Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to be chatting it up with him about what we've all been seeing here in the last few weeks with the Southeastern Conference. We are going to unpack what we saw in the SEC ACC Challenge. Now, I did do this interview before we got some of those late results like Auburn getting dump trucked over Arizona from the SEC, but we're going to take a look at the conference and how it's a little bit changed from a season ago, how it's not quite what it was last year, and some of the teams that we should be bullish on from the SEC and some that might have some question marks looking at you, Kentucky, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Lars EM, they meet us on matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but everything is powered by Better. That is BETR. Better is making it all the better to get in on daily fantasy, because all you need to do is be a listener to this podcast, go to BETR.app, and then put in the promo code of VSINPOD, VSINPOD. That gets you $10 free to get all started. You just take a look at a player, determine whether or not they're going to go over or under their stat line. It's that easy. Where jurisdictions have it, you're able to get on money lines and spreads as well. So they're doing a great job getting you guys all set up there. And let's get things all set up to take a look back at what we saw on a fun college basketball Saturday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Iowa State lays the smackdown on Purdue, 81-58 the final. I believe that this is tied for the largest home loss in the AP era for a number 1 ranked team. For Iowa State, 11-23 from 3. Tamon Lipsby returned in this game, and he didn't have a lot of scoring, but he did dole out 8 assists while not turning it over once. For Iowa State, they win the turnover battle 15-12. For Purdue, they go 4 of 18 from 3-point range. They also went 6 of 14 at the free throw line, as Fletcher Lawyer had 5 more points than myself in this game. Braden Smith, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, 11 points, but also 6 turnovers in this game as well. For Purdue, they hardly win the rebound battle, 33-32. This was just a old-fashioned butt kicking from Iowa State, and then a big impactful game for Duke, being able to go on the road. They get it done against Michigan State, 66-60. Not a thing of beauty from Duke, but they do have their main man in Cameron Boozer step up in a big way. 15 rebounds, 18 points, 5 blocks. For Duke, they kept things relatively efficient, 8 turnovers out of them. Michigan State was even better. They only had 5 turnovers, but for Duke, they win the rebound battle, 44-43. And then for Michigan State, even though they go 8 of 22 from 3-point range, they weren't able to knock it down inside. They go 13 out of 44 on their 2-point shots, so Duke did a really nice job inside. Now, Jeremy Fierce had 13 assists and 1 turnover, but he also went 0 of 10 from the floor. Carson Cooper, 16 points, 16 rebounds, but not enough on this day as Duke overcomes going just 9 of 29 from 3-point range. They do find a way to persevere and get the job done. Illinois in the great state of Tennessee. This was a neutral court game in Nashville, but it was in the state of Tennessee. They are able to really blow past Tennessee in the second half, 75-62. The final, Illinois was down 2 points going into the second half, but it was all about Keaton Wagler being able to go 4 of 11 from 3 for Illinois. He supplied the team with 16 points. Kylan Boswell was rock solid with 15 points. Very just workmanlike 6 turnovers from Illinois in this game, while Tennessee had 13, and that's been their Achilles heel. Jacoby Gillespie, he had 15 points, but he did so on 20 shots, 5 assists, but also 3 turnovers as well. Jalen Carey, he had 3 turnovers off the bench himself, so that was less than amazing. amazing for Tennessee. 6 of 20 from three-point range and 8 of 18 at the free throw line. Felix Aparo, 1 of 6 at the free throw line, and he had 5 points. He had more free throw attempts than he had points, so that's not great to say the least for Tennessee. This game was an almighty slog, but St. John's finds a way to be able to persevere. This by kind of 63-58. I mean, this was Chris Beard make it ugly style basketball. His team goes 2 of 16 from 3, but they managed to hang in there as Iliermis Cardine, hopefully I said that correct. He gave the team 16 points, and Malik Dia off the bench, he was able to supply 18 points as well. AJ Soar was limited to 15 minutes, 2 points against his former team, and he had 3 turnovers, so that was not necessarily great. Meanwhile, for St. John's, he had 15 points out of Zuby Ejiofor. He threw in their 9 rebounds, and for St. John's, wasn't, again, a pretty thing, but they forced 20 turnovers of Ole Miss. Ole Miss forced St. John's into 20 turnovers as well, but St. John's found a way to get to the free throw line, 25 out of 35 at the charity stripe. They overcome going 4 of 22 from three-point range, so a nice ugly win there. A pretty win for Louisville, though. 87-78, they take down Indiana out there in the state of Indiana's. For Louisville, they continue to shoot it well from 3. 13 of 31 from the outside with Isaac McNeely going 5 of 9 from three-point range. And some interesting AI animation from CBS in this game, by the way, if you didn't see that. But for Indiana, they go 11 of 34 from three-point range. Tucker DeVries did his part, 26 points. He threw in their 5 boards. But for Louisville, we always talk about the offense of this team. They did a relatively solid job on the glass as well. They played even up 33-33. 24 of 28 is what Louisville went at the free throw line, with Ryan Conwell being able to lead the way with 21 points. So that was a really nice win for them. Houston, they find a way to get the job done. The spread, I was seeing it more around about 17 or so they don't cover that, but they still get a nice win in the state of Texas, 82-67 final in this one. As for Florida State, they live by the 3 and they die by the 3, and they went 10 of 32 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Houston, Emmanuel Sharp lived up to his name. He was sharp, 27 points, 6 of 12 from three-point range. Houston did win the turnover battle as well, 19-13, so a little bit of a sloppy Joe's game out there. And for Florida State, to their credit, they win the rebound battle, 37-35, but just a lot of misses in general from this team, as you had Robert McCray supplied the team with 16 points, but lots of cold shooting, including Kobe McGee off the bench, 9 points on 12 field goal attempts, so you needed a little bit more there, and boy, oh boy, were you able to get a whole heck of a lot more from Arizona. 97-68, they lay the smackdown on Auburn. Auburn just 6 of 25 from 3. Taj Bedford actually had a really nice game. He had 30 points, and nobody else, aside from Keshawn Hall with his 13 points, showed up in this game, as Arizona shoots 61% from the floor, 6 of 15 from three-point range. You had Koa Pete supply 18 points. You had Anthony Del Rosso off the bench, go for 11. Braden Burris, along with Jaden Bradley, they both gave you 16 points apiece. For Arizona, they win the turnover battle 15-13. They win the rebound battle 40-34. So a really nice performance out of the Wildcats, who look much, much better on defense than they have in past years. And for Michigan, they weren't necessarily playing the toughest opponent, but boy, they got an easy cover, and they made Rutgers look like a high school team. 101-60 final in this one. For Michigan, 13 out of 29 from three-point range. Ade Mara, only 4 points, but 11 rebounds in 18 minutes. Yaxel Lendeborg, 14 points, 8 rebounds. For Rutgers, just not a lot doing for them in this game. They lose the turnover battle 16-11. They lose a rebound battle 40-29. Completed utter domination for Michigan. Another 30-plus point win for them. This one being a 40-plus point win. So they're able to add that one to the resume. And this was the upchucking of the day. USC up 18 points at the half on Washington, and they let go of the rope in the second half. 84-76. USC completely blows this game at home. Just a relatively sad display from USC in the second half, as for USC, they actually do win the turnover battle by a kind of 12-8, but for Washington, the man that was able to really bail them out in this game, Hans Steinbach, boy, are they glad to have him back. 24 points, 16 rebounds. For Washington, they only go 6 of 21 from 3. For USC, they go 8 of 23 from 3, and for USC, they go 24 of 28 at the free throw line, but they really couldn't knock down their two-point shots. They went 14 out of 37 on the inside with their two-point shots. For Washington, they won from within, 45-31. They do win the rebound battle, so Washington finds a way to be able to persevere and get the job done. And then your other ranked team in action, that'd be Arkansas. They get a nice win and cover in what was technically a neutral court game out there in North Little Rock, 82-58 the final. And for Fresno State, they just got nothing going in the first half. They were down 34-24 at the half for Fresno State, 4 of 26 from three-point range. Fresno State actually wins the rebound battle by a count of 41-39, but a nice performance here out of Darius Haycuff. He goes 7-12 from the floor. He was able to supply 18 points. Malik Thomas off the bench, he's able to give you 12 points, and for this Arkansas team, they did a nice job winning the turnover battle 17-8, as for Fresno State, still looking a little bit less than savory on the offensive side of things. If you're looking at games that did not involve the top 25, you had Wisconsin absolutely lay it on Marquette, 96-76 battle for the great state of Wisconsin. Saw Wisconsin go 14 out of 33 from three-point range. John Blackwell, 6 of 12 from the outside, 30 points. Wisconsin not too much scoring off the bench, but they did not need it, and for Marquette, they do a nice job winning the turnover battle 12-8, but they get absolutely lambasted on glass 46-33, as Alcaeus Baliscus was able to supply Wisconsin with 11 points, 10 rebounds. Nolan Winter made it feel like winter for the Marquette Golden Eagles, 13 rebounds, and for Marquette, you had Adrian Stevens actually step up for 15 points. He hasn't done a whole heck of a lot this year, but yeah, that was not great to say the least. This was not great to say the least for Oklahoma, as they got down 47-28 at the half. We've noticed this with Oklahoma. They played much better in the second half rather than in the first half. They actually won the second half, but way too little, way too late, 86-70. Arizona State gets the job done as Arizona State 13 out of 24 from three-point range. They win the rebound battle 40-38, and for Oklahoma, yeah, Nigel Pack just not backing in this game, 7 points. That was not great, to say the least. If you're looking at a game that was just a butt kicking at the half, Elon, my goodness, they were up 50-15 at the half over Wofford. They were able to cruise. They were able to get a nice win by a count of 73-52, as Chandler Cottrell continues to be really good for the Elon team. He was able to supply the team with 21 points. That was certainly one that stood out to me. What else stands out is UC Santa Barbara getting their offense going 109-84 over the Meep Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners, as for the Gauchos, they go 14 out of 29 from three-point range in this game with Ada Mahaney, 7 of 7 from three-point range. He's showing why he was the WCC Player of the Year a few years ago. He was able to supply the team with 30 points, and for Santa Barbara, they win the rebound battle 40-22. So that's just a good old classic butt kicking right there. This was also a pretty interesting result. Providence, they take it to Rhode Island by a count of 90-71. Well, it looked to be an improved Rhode Island team. They just did not have it on this day with regards to being able to take care of the ball. They lose the turnover battle 17-15, and both teams actually go 14 out of 29 from three-point range. Good odd shooting in this game, but for Providence, they do a nice job in terms of getting to the free throw line, 14 of 19 at the charity stripe, and for Rhode Island, just 7 out of 14 at the free throw line. So that was not necessarily great for them, to say the least. You saw Virginia be able to take it to Dayton 86-73 as Jakari White stepped up big in this one for Virginia. He supplied the team with 25 points, and the ACC in general has been looking relatively strong. Georgia Tech, they got a nice win over Monmouth, 79-67, and for Boston College, they got the job done against New Haven, but this was a sub-500 team at the Division II level last year, and Boston College was life or death in this game, 67-63 the final for Boston College. They actually go 10 of 25 from three. They heated up from the outside, and Fred Payne off the bench really bailed the team out with 18 points, but this was not the effort that they were looking for, as Boston College loses the turnover battle 15-10. So in a conference that has a lot of hope right now in the ACC, Boston College looking, well, a little bit hopeless. And for NC State, a little bit more of a test than what you were expecting out of UNC Asheville, 75-63. NC State, they do get the job done, but it wasn't necessarily as easy as they expected, as Asheville goes 10 of 24 from three-point range. Asheville does a solid job with regards to the turnover battle as well. They lose that battle 14-12, but they have really been having a tough time taking care of the ball this far this season, and Darion Williams only 8 points in this one as well. Also out there in the ACC, you saw a nice quality win for Wake Forest over West Virginia. How about 75-66 final in this one for Wake Forest, 10-25 from three. West Virginia's defense continues to be relatively rock solid. They win the rebound battle 38-26, but they go just 6 of 27 from three with Honor Off, huffing and puffing to go 5 of 17 from three. The rest of the team went 1 of 10 from the outside, so that was not great. Chance Moore did give you more off the bench with 16 points, but West Virginia falls in that one. And Virginia Tech, how about a nice 73-62 win over a George Mason team that entered in this game 9-0. George Mason was able to do a pretty solid job on defense, but cooled down from three, 7-21 from the outside. Virginia Tech actually loses the rebound battle, still dealing with the injury to Toby Lawal, 36-27, but they did a nice job winning that turnover battle 16-9. And you had in this game a nice performance off the bench from Jaden Jewett. He was able to give the team 18 points. He goes 6 of 12 from three-point range, so that was a nice get the job done sort of performance out there. This was also a pretty rock solid get the job done sort of performance for the SEC South Carolina all over a not so great Stetson team, 82-51 the final. So that was a quality win and cover. We've got Big Ten Conference play that's going on right now, and with Northwestern, they were able to put up a bunch of points on Ohio State. They got up 44-40 at the half, but Ohio State finds way to get a road win, 86-82 the final for Northwestern. 8-24 from three-point range. Nick Martinelli did his part, 32 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, but Northwestern is typically sure-handed with the ball. They lose the turnover battle 14-11, and for Ohio State, how about 29 points out of Brandon Noel? He was able to give the team 7 rebounds, as well as for Ohio State, they actually lose a rebound battle 34-29, and they do go 12-20 at the free throw line, but they did a nice job in terms of winning that turnover battle. That allows them to be able to persevere, get the job done out there. You also saw Iowa be able to lay it on Maryland by a count of 83-64, as for Maryland, they just could not slow down this Iowa team from three-point range. 9-22 from distance. Bennett Sturts, he could easily be amazing for this Iowa team. 25 points, and Maryland's playing a lot more up-tempo than they have in the past, and that might have been to their detriment in this game. They lose a turnover battle 18-10, and then for UCLA, they get the win over Oregon. A lot of places had this line right around about 10.5 to 11.5, so it was depending upon your number there, but 74-63 final in this one. As for Oregon, they just continue to be not so great on offense. 8-27 from the outside. Jackson Shellstead was able to give you 20 points. Sakai Simpkins, 14 points, but really nobody else around them was able to step up. They are dealing with the injury to Nate Biddle. He did not play in this game, but for UCLA, they do a nice job winning that turnover battle 11-9, and every starter for UCLA, at least 12 points. They only got 4 points off the bench, but you know what? The starting five, they were certainly able to do their part for UCLA, and being able to do their part for the Big East. Seton Hall, I feel like this team should be ranked right now, and Shaheen Holloway has done one of the better coaching jobs in all of college basketball. 78-67. They go to the octagon and do it and get it done. As for Kansas State, 15 out of 35 at the free throw line. Like, you want to see where Kansas State lost this game. Very, very obvious right there. And they went 6 of 30 from 3. You figured there'd be regression there, but Seton Hall wasn't much better. They go 5 of 23 from the outside, but Seton Hall was the stronger team in terms of being able to knock down their free throws. Seton Hall also won the turnover battle 16-12, as you had Elijah Fisher, AJ San McRae gave you 16 points apiece, in Kansas State, an undisciplined team that has nobody to blame but themselves for that loss. And for Oklahoma State, they find a way to persevere over Grand Canyon. They get a solid win and cover in the state of Arizona, 84-78. The final is for Grand Canyon, 8-28 from 3, and they've just really regressed on the defensive side of things. As for Grand Canyon, they actually win the turnover battle by a count of 12-9, but for Oklahoma State, they shoot 58% from the floor on their two-point shots. They go 26 out of 39, and for Oklahoma State, 25 big points out of Parsa Fala. That was able to persevere them to victory. And for the Big 12 as well, you saw Colorado fall to Colorado State 91-86 the final. Colorado State is a top 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and good three-point shooting on both sides. Colorado 7 of 19 from 3. 18 out of 35 from Colorado State, though, as Josh Passarelli, 8 of 10 from the outside, 26 big points. So he had himself a very, very nice Saturday, and also having themselves a very nice Saturday. How about Memphis? It's been a rough start to the season for them, but they take down Baylor 78-71 at home. As for Memphis, they only go 3 of 16 from three-point range, but Zach Davis stepped up. He gave the team 23 points, 13 rebounds. For Memphis, they actually won the turnover battle 13-9. That's typically not their forte. And for Aaron Bradshaw, he has been a disappointment since coming into college basketball. He had himself a really nice day off the bench. How about 17 points, 7 boards out of him? Tonde Yusufu, he supplied Baylor with 22 points, but for Baylor, losing that turnover battle was a little bit rough for them, and they actually shot worse from 2-point range rather than 3-point range. So that's just simply not going to cut it there. And then in terms of the Big East, you saw a little bit of a rough loss for Butler. Boise State, who they begin the season losing to a Division II team in Hawaii Pacific that's based out in a strip mall. They go on the road. They get a 77-68 win. For Butler, they have been a rock-solid team offensively, but they go just 4 of 18 from three-point range, and Boise State brought the fight to them on the glass. Boise State wins the rebound battle 45-31. Dom Parolin off the bench had 10 boards. Dylan Andrews, he goes just 4 of 19 from the floor, but it supplies 20 points because he goes 11 of 13 at the free throw line. So Boise State, a nice quality winner out there. And then also from the Big East, you saw DePaul life and death with Arkansas Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff got up 37-28 at the half. DePaul finds a way to avoid a very embarrassing loss, 76-72 the final, but very easy cover here for Arkansas Pine Bluff, who was catching north of 20 points for DePaul. They're bailed out by the fact that they went 29-41 at the free throw line, while Pine Bluff went 6 of 7 at the free throw line. A little bit of home cooking there, but Cruz McClure off the bench, 17 points. He had 26 points out of NJ Benson, and for Arkansas Pine Bluff, Keon Williams, who comes over from Abilene Christian, rock solid here. He gave that team 27 points, so that was a nice quality game out there. We do not know the final out there in Hawaii because I have to have this up at midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, but you also saw a very nice performance out of Akron, 88-71. They take down Tulane as the entire American Conference has been a little bit less than tremendous right now. Akron, 13 of 31 from 3-point range, 7 of 33 from Tulane. Tulane wins the turnover battle 14-8, but they continue to get rammed on the glass, 46-28. Akron is able to win that rebound battle, so man, that was interesting to say the least. And you saw George Washington put up a really, really big score. Our nation's first president over the tag team of William and Mary, 99-86 the final in this one, as you had 105 points scored in the first half. And for old GW, how about Gina Marugin off the bench supplying 20 points? And for George Washington, they put up 99 points despite going 6 of 27 from 3-point range. That's just how wild and crazy some of their games have been getting this far this season. And if you are taking a look trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been a very much underwhelming season thus far this season, but we saw a whole bunch of overs on Saturday. If you're looking at Saturday and Saturday alone, the over rate is right now at 58.3% with that Hawaii game pending, 56 overs to 40 unders, and favorites on the spread hitting at about 48% on Saturday, 46-50-1 against the spread as I do this with a few results pending. And we look at the last 7 days in college basketball, favorites are about 50-50, 138, 139, and 6 against the spread, with the over rate being about 51%, 142 overs to 137 unders. Overall for the season, the under has the lead on overs, 749 unders to 733 overs, so about a 50.5% hit rate to the under. And overall this season, favorites hitting at a little bit over 51% on the spread, 755, 723, and 22. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming up next, let's talk some SEC with our good friend Blake Lovell, who does a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16. Right here on Canisius with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Davidson Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Canisius with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by this man as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's hard at work, even though the name says Southeastern 16, of really taking a look at everything in this landscape of college basketball. I know that they've been doing some great breakdowns over there at Southeastern 16 as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And Blake, we just got done with the SEC versus ACC challenge. And what were some of your takeaways with it? Because I think it was very far-fetched to think that the ACC was only going to win 2 games in this challenge like they did last year. The things in college basketball have ironed out a little bit more. And if you were expecting that, well, you weren't paying attention to what happened in college basketball this offseason. But I thought that there were some not so great signs for the SEC. I'm looking at you, Kentucky, but I thought that there were also some very good signs, including the team out there in your neck of the woods of Vanderbilt Commodores.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of the story of this thing. You know, after night one, I think everybody was just like, wait a second, is the ACC going to do basically what the SEC did last year? And of course, the SEC came back on the second night and really took care of business. Arkansas's win was obviously significant. But yeah, I mean, I think you come out of this really kind of changing the landscape a little bit, if you hadn't already, on what you kind of project to be the top teams in this league, because I think it's pretty clear right now, in whatever order you want to put them in. Like, I think Alabama and Vanderbilt are the clear 1-2. You know, you could have some people argue for Vanderbilt, you have some people argue for Alabama, who I think still got a nice win against Clemson. It may have been closer than people thought. Remember, Alabama's without two key players in that game. Finally got Jalil Bethea back, but only played, I think, 6 minutes or so. So I still think if we're comparing potential and all that, I think Alabama's the team with the highest upside in the league. But again, I don't know why people still want to write off Vanderbilt. And I've heard all week long, Greg, I've written about this. I've said it on our show so many times. Everybody's telling me that Vanderbilt's played nobody. It's simply not true. Vanderbilt has, I think, still to this point, 4 like top 60 KenPom type wins. They don't have the high level wins that, let's say, in Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, teams like that have, but they've got the combination of wins that still is more than anyone else in the SEC when it comes to playing teams of that caliber. So, and it's not just that they're winning, they're just simply destroying teams. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind here. It's not a team that's just going out and playing around this competition. It's one of the best offensive teams in the country, one of the best backcourts in the country right now. And I think for anyone who's going to still try to sit back and act like this is nothing more than the schedule, simply not the case. Watch them play. They've been fantastic. So, yeah, I think, you know, clearly coming out of it, to me, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, I think are teams that you're feeling pretty good about in terms of where they are. You're probably feeling a little bit better if you're a Florida fan just based on the performance at Duke. Frustrating to lose that way, but I think the Gators, the path is still there too in terms of where they can get to. Kind of a mixed bag. Maybe elsewhere, Auburn, I think, also feeling pretty good about itself after that 10-point win against NC State.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that it's a little bit of a mixed bag right now for the SEC. Being able to get that Auburn win, I think, is very big. And with the SEC, I don't know if you agree/disagree, but it doesn't feel like we have quite the, shall we say, star power that we did a season ago. Because Florida, you knew, was a top 5 team. You knew that it was going to be an absolutely magnificent year for Auburn as well. Those two teams have obviously taken a little bit of setback. I know that there's a little bit of debate as to who might be the top team in the SEC right now. Alabama seems to be sort of that team despite having a few losses, but very clear that they might not be on the same wavelength as, say, a Purdue and Michigan. And it feels like it's just a really deep conference that doesn't quite have those top 5/top 10 teams from a season ago, but a lot of really good top 20, top 25 teams.
Yeah, I think that's right. I feel like that was kind of the discussion we had coming into the season. I think it was unrealistic to expect the SEC to have the same caliber at the top, given the fact that I think it was Basket Under Review. They lose 26 of the top 30 scorers in the SEC departed this offseason. And when you combine that, you know, with just kind of the mixture of new talent coming in and just really understanding that this was not going to be the same. You didn't have the level of experience you had with some of those teams last year that had kind of been together, even though you had new transfers and all that. You had a core that had been together on quite a few of those top teams. Not the case this year. And so some teams taking a step back, you know, teams obviously taking a step forward, like Vanderbilt's the best example of that. So you're still going to have, I think, you know, probably a decent group of teams you feel like can get to that second weekend and maybe beyond. But it's not going to be with the level of confidence we had last year, just kind of knowing that, hey, you know, the SEC, if they don't get 4 teams in the Elite Eight, it's going to be disappointing. They got it there. Of course, you had 2 in the Final Four playing each other. Florida wins the national championship. It's just going to be much different. And like you said, I think when you're comparing top tier of the SEC to teams like Michigan, you know, Purdue, you know, Duke, and teams like that, I think it's going to be harder at the end of the day to feel as confident that those teams can match up as well, especially once you get into March and all that.
Absolutely. As joining me on the show, we do have Blake Lovell. He's doing a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16, and he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly it's been a lot of intrigue what we've seen in the SEC this year. Certainly a few more losses than a season ago, but I mean, that was just to be expected. Other than South Carolina, I think every team had 0-1 loss. But I mean, how do you take a look at this landscape right now? Because I think that we just mentioned it. The middle, it does seem a little bit better, and your lone two undefeated teams as we're doing this are actually Vanderbilt and LSU, which I don't know how many people had that on their bingo card, but I do feel like there's a little bit of concern for a team like a Tennessee, because for Tennessee, the defense is obviously rock solid, but I think they're suffering from a lot of the teams that have struggled in the SEC have. It just feels like the teams that have taken 2+ losses have had inconsistent guard play, and that includes what we've seen out of Kentucky and their lack of three-point shooting thus far this season.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is we always say this is not a great shooting league, but I think this year, with some of these teams, especially the top, that you're kind of banking on to be the standard, they can't shoot at all. And I think, with Florida, it's maybe the extreme example, shooting 27%. Kentucky, I know people will tell me they've had some good shooting performances, but I don't really care what you do against the teams that are ranked, 300 and lower. I care about what you do against the teams that you're going to be playing regularly once you get into SEC play. And if you look at the way they've shot the ball so far, 1 of 13 against North Carolina, 7 of 30 against Michigan State. I know they went 12 of 34 against Louisville, but that was really in a game that was basically you're just desperate, comeback mode. You're shooting a lot of threes, and sometimes some of them are going to fall. That's a worry when you look at those two teams in particular, the two that were expected to be the best teams in the SEC. And you mentioned Tennessee. They're a team that I think volume probably will not be Tennessee's thing when it comes to the three-point shooting, but you do wonder. And I think we talked about this in the offseason, Greg. It just seemed inevitable for a team that I think is really going to have to rely on Jacoby Gillespie and Nate Ament to be the guys night in and night out. And when one of those guys struggles or both of those guys struggle, they're going to have a big issue. I think no matter how good their defense is, they're going to have problems, I think, finding ways to close out games, which will not be easy. And, of course, I think by the time maybe most people listen to this who have already played Illinois, we'll find out, exactly how that plays out for them. But remember, they also play Louisville on December 16th. You got to score to beat Louisville. And I think we're going to really find out about this Tennessee team over the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, it's kind of something that's really standing out. And maybe, when we look back at it, it's going to be, hey, the teams that value the spacing and could shoot in terms of spreading the floor, like Vanderbilt, Alabama, teams like that. I mean, even some of these other teams that maybe are shooting it a little better than we thought, they may be the teams that rise up in an SEC that historically isn't good three-point shooting wise, but top teams this year, at least the projected top teams, really are struggling there.
Yep, absolutely. And that's been one of the big things for the SEC thus far this season. And we're talking about three-point shooting, but how much of a concern is the turnovers right now? Because I've noticed that with Tennessee. I've noticed that with Mississippi State. It feels like that's the one Achilles heel that a lot of these SEC teams are having. Throw in their Florida as well. They've been turning the ball over a lot. And if these SEC teams are able to clean things up in terms of turnovers, I think that they're all going to be very fine. But I find that to be really the theme with the teams that have lost games this far this season.
Yeah, and I feel like you also have some teams that, and it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Like, if you look at sort of the tempo and maybe the speed that some of these teams are playing with, it almost seems like, obviously Vanderbilt's get up down the floor. Alabama, we know, gets up and down the floor. Georgia gets up and down the floor, unlike any team that we maybe ever thought we'd see under Mike White. But, I mean, they are just humming, getting down the floor. But then you see some of these teams where, yes, like maybe they're going to still push the ball, but it comes down to, like, can you run your half-court offense sometimes? And when you have some of these teams just simply struggle there a bit, maybe can't get the shot they want, you're going to get to some more turnovers and all of that. And so I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning. It's kind of just the consistency of the guard play. And I think that's where even a team like Arkansas, right? If Arkansas's front court plays the way they did against Louisville, I don't know that anybody's going to be able to beat Arkansas because their backcourt is as good as it gets in terms of the dynamic you have with Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, DJ Wagner. I think is still going to be a valuable part of this team. He doesn't have to score 20 a night or anything, but he's still going to play a big role, I think, moving forward. So I think that's the thing is you've just got to have guards you can rely on in this league. And we've kind of seen over the years, we can hype up some of these teams that great front courts, but unless those guys are bringing the ball down the floor, kind of igniting your offense, it's not always the easiest thing in the SEC to play just through the big man. You've got to have guards that can get the ball there. That's where we're going to find out maybe how that separates some of these teams, and it already has when we talk about teams like Vanderbilt, Alabama and Arkansas maybe.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that what we're looking at right now in the SEC is a little bit of sort of a byproduct as well of having a lot of change in the backcourt. These teams that they brought in guys in the transfer portal in the offseason, they seem to be the ones that are dealing with the turnover issues. Meanwhile, a team like, for example, Alabama that brought back LeBaron Filan, they've been able to do a great job in terms of not having those turnovers as well. And how much do you think that that's been a little bit of a theme this year? Because the backcourts in transition seem to be the ones that are struggling. Meanwhile, the teams that had chemistry from a season ago, saying it's really Mississippi State, but Mississippi State, as we know, guard play has never really been the forte of Chris Jans, to say the least. It feels like they're the ones that are really succeeding.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like you said, you just got kind of the different makeup for some of these teams. And it's kind of a league, too, where sometimes you have to be a chameleon. You have to be able to kind of adapt on the fly. And I think sometimes that's easier than others for certain programs. And we always say this, too. It's just you don't really ever know until you get these rosters together exactly what it's going to look like. You can look at coach trends and see the way they want to play and all this stuff. But, hey, until you see that actual roster that you got on the floor, it's hard to know exactly the way you're going to be able to play. So that, again, forces you to adapt sometimes a little bit more on the fly. If you look up and you're like, well, we may have swung and missed on this guy or that guy, all of a sudden, that can disrupt your entire dynamic and forces you to play in a different way. And so I'm curious to see how some of these teams rebound, especially. You mentioned Mississippi State, and I say rebound in terms of the actually bouncing back. Texas, Ole Miss, teams like that really have not gotten off to good starts. And for Ole Miss and Texas specifically, had some, pretty disappointing losses, I think, in the ACC SEC Challenge. I think these are teams that, clearly on the outside looking in right now, if we're talking NCAA tournament, they've got time to turn it around, but I want to see how they continue to adapt just in terms of their approach, because something's going to have to change with teams like that if they're going to have a path to get there.
Yep, absolutely. As Blake Lovell does such a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16, he's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and obviously there's a lot of intrigue that is going on with the SEC right now, and we're going to see quite a few teams on Sunday actually playing in the SEC, or quite a few SEC teams playing on Sunday as well. And there are like three massive matchups I can already think of. LSU versus Texas Tech. That's a big rubber meets the road sort of game. Missouri versus Kansas is going to be a big one as well. And then you've got yourself Texas A&M versus SMU. I take a look at those three games, and out of all of them, I honestly think the biggest game might be LSU versus Texas Tech, because LSU was thought to be team number 15 by a lot of people in the SEC. If they go out there and they knock off Texas Tech in the great state of Texas, I think that would be a massive coup here for the SEC.
Yeah, it's easily the biggest game of the season for LSU thus far, and you could probably even say it's the biggest game LSU is going to play until they go to Vanderbilt.
Biggest game for the program in like 7 years.
I was going to say, it's been a while. You have to go back to the end of the Will Wade era for the last time it felt like they were playing big games like this. And so, yeah, it is one where I think Texas Tech clearly still a work in progress. They probably not quite hit the level that some people thought they would to this point. The 30-point loss to Purdue is going to shake your confidence a little bit in the team. But, hey, we could say the same thing about all the teams that Michigan was throttling in Vegas too. But, yeah, I think this is, a game that feels winnable for LSU. I'd say that with more confidence if Jalen Reed was still in the mix. Just absolutely brutal. It's just the worst luck to have. They're off to a great start, and we kept saying, man, don't forget last year before he went out, like he was such a big part of this team, and he played, I think it was last year, I don't know, was it 7-8 games, something like that. And then what happens this year? He gets hurt in game number 7 or 6 or whatever it was, and he's out for the season again. I talked him up all off season, and that's where I think if this thing starts to go south for LSU, it's going to probably be clear as day. And I know they kind of struggled to get the overtime win at Boston College, but I want to see if this team can step up without him. They found a way to win that one, but Texas Tech is different than Boston College. And I think this is kind of that prove-it type game. With Dayton Thomas, I think they've still got a lot of upside, but I'd be lying if I said I don't think it's capped a little bit right now moving forward just based on that injury to Jalen Reed. But, Mike Nwoko's played well. Markel Sutton's played well. They've still got good size, but can they get to that NCAA tournament type level without Reed? I think that remains to be seen.
Yep, I do think that that does as well. And then I think that is absolutely massive what we're going to be seeing between Kansas versus Missouri, because this is a wounded Kansas team that has been without Darren Peterson. With Missouri, they appear to be a little bit improved on the glass as well. That's always been really the Achilles heel of this team. But how do you take a look at this one as well? It's going to be the old border war, so it's going to be a true neutral court game. And I'm glad that we got these back, because I remember there was a year or two where I feel like we didn't have this one. But that said, how do you take a look at this Missouri team? Because I feel like this is a golden opportunity for them to be able to succeed against a Kansas team that has been, shall we say, suspect on offense, but obviously a very good defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another one you circle and say, hey, there are not many opportunities left for Missouri. And when you give that one up that they did at Notre Dame, I just think this becomes, you feel like you've got to win one of these against Kansas or Illinois over the next couple of weeks. And which one's the better option? I don't know. It's not two great options to choose from when it comes to the matchup. But like you said, it does feel like Kansas, kind of a team that can be up and down, and we've seen that over the past couple of weeks. But for Missouri, we just mentioned what a significant injury could mean for LSU. Not having Jaden Stone was a big part of that loss, I think, at Notre Dame, because you only had Mark Mitchell and Jacob Cruz, and no one else really stepped up around those guys. They clearly, I think, need more from Ant Robinson right now, scoring-wise. I mean, in the last 3 games, he's had a combined 14 points. Now, he hasn't had to score in some of those. 2 of those were blowouts against Cleveland State and South Carolina State. But I think you've got to know now that these are the kind of games you need your stars to step up, and he's still a star, and I think they need him to play big in this game. And you need that from Mark Mitchell. You need Jacob Cruz looking like Caleb Grill 2.0 out there, as he has at times already this season. But to me, it's really going to be determined for this Missouri team. What else do you get around those guys? I think that's going to be important. Somebody's got to step up from that other group, knowing that Stone is out, and he's been a big part of the mix so far. So crucial game for Missouri. I think all 8 of their wins right now are in quad 4, which you know what that means, Greg. That means you got a lot of work to do on the NCAA tournament resume, and giving up the loss to Notre Dame the way they did, I think you got to rebound quickly, because something I've pointed out since the SEC schedule came out, whenever that was, Missouri has one of the toughest starts to SEC play of anybody. They're going to host Florida, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, home against Auburn, at LSU. Now, some of those you may say, well, come on, Kentucky's been lackluster, Ole Miss has been lackluster, LSU without Reed. But, man, those are road games in the SEC, and those are pretty tough on paper when you look at it. So I think Missouri really, really needs to win either this one or Illinois to feel a little more confident heading into SEC play.
And then the last big one that we've got on Sunday is going to be Texas A&M versus SMU. And I just want to get your thoughts on Texas A&M, because it feels like some nights this looks like one of the greatest teams in all of college basketball, and on some nights this is a team that is going to have a tough time making the CBI. Like, that's the way that Texas A&M has been thus far. They're obviously going to get a stiff test against SMU. This is going to be in the great state of Texas, so very much a true neutral court game for both of these teams in Arlington. But I think that this is such a fascinating matchup. Could be first to 90 wins with the way that these two teams play. But want to get your thoughts on both this game and Texas A&M as a whole, because I think that if we had to give them a grade, I think the most fair one would be an I for incomplete.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that is they've looked like a different team since Mackenzie Mbako has been on the floor. Now, I say that knowing that I'm not saying he's even played at his best just yet. The Pitt game, he didn't have a great game in that game, but I think just his presence on the floor is significant right now, because it's forcing teams to guard them in a different way, and it's forcing different matchups that they didn't have in those first 2 games that were significant games. They lost by 24 to Oklahoma State, lost by 12, blew the lead against UCF at home. I think that's the difference right now, and I think that's going to continue to kind of play out here as we move forward. He'll be more, I think, part of that offensive production. And I mean, realistically, Greg, it's like, if you think about it, I don't know if there's been maybe 2 players in the league that have been as sort of had a dramatic rise the way that Rayshawn Agee and Ruben Dominguez have had. I mean, Dominguez, my kind of player, as my colleague Max Barr points out all the time. The guy just wants to go out and shoot nothing but threes. And the good thing is he's shooting nothing but threes, but he's making them. I mean, he's had a 10 of 14, 7 of 12. Like, he's having these kind of performances from 3. And Texas A&M fans are saying, where has that been the past however many years the Buzz Williams era was there? Because they didn't have a lot of those. And so I think when you combine that with Mbako just being on the floor, again, it forces teams to guard you a different way, because you've got multiple guys you've got to figure out how you're going to guard here. And I think the fascinating thing is their rotation has been so different than what we thought it would be. Who would have looked up right now and said, hey, You're telling me you just had a game that Pop Isaacs plays 9 minutes and they went on the road by 8? And you kind of have things like that you never know in terms of how it's going to play out early in the season. But something to keep an eye on with A&M. I think this feels like a different team right now than it was a couple weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to kind of turn it on a little bit, find a way to get some of these wins like an SMU, something like that, because they need it to make up for those 2 losses. But I think the path is there for this A&M team.
Yep, I do think so as well with Texas A&M. They're going to be a fascinating team to look at moving forward. And Blake, I know you're doing an amazing job taking a look at this amazing game of college basketball. Let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, check us out over Southeastern 16. Plenty of SEC basketball coverage there daily. Everything else college basketball related, you can follow me on Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake does an incredible job taking a look at this amazing game of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insight. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me on Cusica Soups, now part of the VSiN family podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cusica Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does an amazing job over at Southeastern 16, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter /X feed at @GUnit_81, and we are going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games involving 2 teams from larger conferences first, and then the games at the bottom will have one of the teams involving the game in these conferences. That would be the Atlantic Sun, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Patriot League, the Northeast Conference. We've got the Southland in there. If I haven't said the Big South as well, so that'll get you guys all covered. How about if we do start with this first game? That would be 7:53, 7:54. Merrimack plays us at Fairfield. Fairfield finds themselves as 2.5 to 3.5 point underdogs. So this game between 143 to 143.5, and I did set a total here of a 137. I'm going to be in on the under. Merrimack once again just not really providing a whole heck of a lot on offense. It's getting a little bit better in conference play, and they face a murderer's row schedule, but still, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, Merrimack checking in 297th, and it's a Fairfield team that they actually do a great job taking care of the ball, top 100 team in terms of ball security, but they're outside the top 200 in terms of points per possession because they just don't really shoot very well. I wish I could put it any other way, but you've got a Fairfield team that is right now outside the top 250 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage and 2-point shooting percentage. They're halfway decent at the free throw line, but even though they do a nice job taking care of the ball, and Brandon Sparks in the backcourt has been great. Sparks has been able to give you 17 points, shooting about 40% from 3. There's just not a lot of shooting around him. Deuce Turner down for what has been able to give you 11 points. He's been all around the block over at San Diego, Bucknell, and then Declan Werfinger. He's been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. It is a Fairfield team that is actually doing a really nice job in providing second and third chances. Top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and while they do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball, they don't really force a lot of turnovers in. For Merrimack, first few games of the season, because they were taking on the likes of Florida and Auburn, they weren't able to generate a lot of turnovers, but they're back in the top 75 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're getting back to their roots. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, while Fairfield just inside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, so they're a mid-tempo team, but the big key for Merrimack, getting Todd Brogna going. He comes over from Stonehill, where he was giving that team double figures. He was a nice rebounder. Right now, only about 5.5 points, 4.5 boards. Hasn't been the world's greatest fit with this system. You've got Keviar Kennedy along with Ernest Shelton, though, being able to combine for about 3.5 steals per game. Between the two of them, you're getting darn near 30 points per game, and Shelton is right now taking 9 threes per game, and he's shooting about 36.5% from the outside. Ty Dorsett has done a nice job supplying 10 points per game, and Andres Marrero 2 years ago was a really good 3-point shooter out there in the Atlantic 10, and he's been able to come in and give the team 10.5 points, but it's only shooting 30% for 3. Think that we see a little bit of positivity there. I did say Merrimack, though, is only a 1-point favorite because they just don't have a ton down low, back outside the top 3 in terms of rebound percentage, so being able to get anything more than a point here, I'm going to be willing to take a shot on Fairfield, and did sub by total at 137 here at the 140 plus. I'm going to be in on the under 755, 756 on the card. Southern Indiana is on the road against Indiana State. Indiana State is a favorite of 10.5 points. So on this game, it is 153.5 to a 154, and with Indiana State, I did set them as an 8-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana right now outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for Indiana State, after they were playing at warp speed last year, they were a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. They dialed things back. Their defense has been a whole heck of a lot better than it was a season ago. The offense, not quite the same though. Indiana State right now hovering right around about 128th in terms of total possessions per game. Now Southern Indiana has been gunning it. Southern Indiana is right now 24th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but you also do have a Southern Indiana team that has been quite sloppy with the ball. Right now they're turning the ball over about 12.5 times per game. You could use a little bit more security there, but Ismail Habib, after he missed pretty much all of last season due to injury 2 years ago, was the main facilitator over at Portland State. He's finding his bearings, 18.5 points, shooting 37.5% from three-point range. It's a Southern Indiana team that's been pretty solid in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Top 150 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, bottom 50 team in defensive rebound percentage. You're allowing teams to get a lot of second and third chances. So Tolu Samuels has come on strong, only about 6.5 points per game, but he's supplying the team with about 9 rebounds per game. Trey Thomas, who is a nice double-figure scorer at Bethune-Cookman, him missing a bunch of games has really been slowing this team down a little bit, as he has missed each of the last 5 games, probably going to be out for this game, but even with them out, I just have not been really impressed by this Indiana State team, who they do return some pieces from a season ago, like a Camp Wagner, who's been able to give you 11.5 points, about 5 rebounds per game. The overall rebounding for Indiana State still is not great. They're outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they're shooting less than 30% from 3. Their main forte last year was popping it and locking it from 3. You got Wagner shooting 31% from 3. You've had Ian Scott really step up, 13.5 points, 2.5 assists, 8 rebounds per game, so I like what he's able to bring to the table. And then Marcus Harding, one of the main holdovers from a season ago. He's right now supplying about 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, but you're going to need to get a little bit more out of him, in my opinion. And then Sterling Young, who is a really nice scorer over at Florida A&M last season, he's only been able to shoot about 29.5% from three-point range as well, and it's an Indiana State team that's still really sloppy with the ball. They are outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, 14 turnovers per game now, top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers as well, but with the way that this Indiana State team is having just so many issues in terms of taking care of the ball, they've throttled it down a little bit more. I do think that Southern Indiana finds a way to hold in there. I did set a total of a 150. Southern Indiana, they themselves having some turnover woes, so I'm going to be in on the under, and I'm willing to take those points with Southern Indiana. 757, 758 on the card. This is from the T-Mobile Center, true neutral court game between Kansas and Missouri. Missouri's right now a 3.5 to a 5-point dog. Total on this game between 149 to 149.5, and with Darren Peterson in, because it sounds as though he is going to play, I did set Kansas as a 4-point favorite, so now that we're getting up to 4.5, 5, that does become my buy point here on Missouri. And this Kansas team, I do think, is going to start to play a little bit more up-tempo, as they've been outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. Without Peterson, they just have not been able to get a lot of clean offenses. Right now, your top scorer has been Flory Badunga, who's been able to give you 15 points, 2.5 blocks. He's been really good down low. Trey White has been able to shoot about 41% from 3, but it's been a pedestrian 3-point shooting team, shooting about 33% from the outside. Melvin Council, he does a lot of things well, 11 points, 4 boards, 5 assists. He really doesn't turn it over a lot, but he's just not been a great 3-point shooter this season. Marco Jackson, you were expecting a little bit more than 5 points per game out of him, and for Peterson, in the 2 games that he's actually played, he's been able to give the team 43 points, one of the most highly touted freshmen in all of college basketball. I'm not certain that he's going to be 100% in this game. You're probably not going to get him at full bore, and that's going to help out a Missouri team then. They're not necessarily playing at the same aggressive tempo that they have in the past. Typically, Dennis Gates teams, they really look to get up and down. Right now for Missouri, in terms of total possessions per game, about 106th in all of college basketball, but they continue to be one of the more efficient offenses in all of college basketball. You've had Jacob Cruz shoot over 40% from 3. He's been able to supply the team with 13 plus points per game, and he's been mostly coming in off the bench. Missouri is right now 14th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and recognizes that's a little bit of a byproduct of playing outgun competition, but Anthony Robinson, Sebastian Mack in the backcourt have both been able to give you about 10 points per game. You've got Mark Mitchell doing it all, 18 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. Not necessarily a guy that's going to unlaunch from 3-point range or anything like that, but Missouri as a whole is shooting 38% from 3. They've got really, really good size around the perimeter, and now they've got a little bit more down low with Sean Phillips, the true 7-footer coming in, give the team 9 points, 6.5 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, and I do think that this Missouri team is a little bit better equipped to be able to not get completely outgunned on the glass. For Missouri, they always find themselves outside the top 2 in terms of rebound percentage under Dennis Gates, but this year they've been much better down low, including the 2-point shooting percentage being within the top 20. I do think that Missouri going to do a nice job executing on offense. They haven't turned the ball over about 13.5 times per game. Kansas's forte is not really generating turnovers, though, so I think that you get a Kansas team that's a little bit revamped on offense with the return of Peterson. I set my total here at a 152. I like the over, and anything above 4, I'm willing to take those points with Missouri. 759, 760 on the card. It is St. Thomas, and they play us with Weber State. Weber State is a underdog of 7 to 7.5 points. So on this game is 152.5 to 153, and with St. Thomas, I did set them as a favorite of 4 points. So I'm going to be willing to take those points with Weber State. They've done a nice job cranking up their tempo a little bit more. Last year, they were outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They're up to about 60th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. While St. Thomas, they're a very mid-tempo team, about 183rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. St. Thomas does a really good job of being able to keep their possessions clean, a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They do nothing to give themselves second chances. So their 6 offensive rebounds per game are the fewest in all of college basketball. Nolan Mainsail has been a really good scorer for the team, giving you about 20 points per game. But St. Thomas, and they should see some positivity with this, but they're shooting just 30.1% from 3-point range this season. Again, with Mainsail shooting about 21% from 3, that'll go northward, but they've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Austin Hero. That is the brother of Tyler Hero. You've got Isaiah Johnson Aguirre, who's been able to come in, give this team about 10.5 points. He's been shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and it is a St. Thomas team that's solid at generating turnovers. A top 175 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but you do have a Weber State team that's got a lot of versatility, a lot of guys between like 6'5" to 6'7". They're able to go bombs away from 3, and Weber State is right now allowing teams to shoot 23.1% from 3. That is going to be going northward, but Jace Whiting, who comes over from UNLV and Boise State, is giving you 14 points, 2.5 assists. He's shooting 40% from 3. Vajami Vartinen has been able to give you about 11.5 points. He shoots 36.5% from the outside. And then you've got a trio of guys in Edwin Suarez Jr., Malik Goma, and Nigel Burris, who all supply between 6.3 and 7.1 rebounds per game. It is a Weber State team that has been really good on the offensive glass. Top 125 team in terms of just their overall rebound percentage. And I do think that they're going to have a nice edge there. That is going to be able to keep them lively against the St. Thomas team that, again, is just really lacking that down low. Weber State, about 12.5 turnovers per game. Not great, not terrible at taking care of the ball. I think that they do just enough to hold in there, and I do think that this game has a propensity for some late game fellas, so I did set a total here of a 154 right now, seeing 152.5, 153, like the over and the points with Weber State. 761, 762 on the card. Illinois, Chicago, they are on the road against Yale. Yale is a 12.5 to 13.5 point favorite, so on this game it is between 151.5 to a 152, and set Yale as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Illinois, Chicago. A disappointing loss, to say the least, for Illinois and Chicago. A few nights ago, they lost to Arkansas Pine Bluff as a massive favorite. That said, with Illinois, Chicago, you still have a nice veteran leader in the backcourt, and Ahmad Henderson, who's supplying 16.5 points, 2.5 assists per game. Illinois, Chicago really needs to do a better job taking care of the ball outside the top 320 in terms of ball security with 15 turnovers per game. They have also been a top 50 team in terms of generating turnovers, and they've been good at guarding the 3-point line. Teams are only shooting about 29.5 to 30% from 3-point range against Illinois, Chicago, and this team is doing a great job of giving themselves second chances. Top 80 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they've done it a lot by committee, as you've had Rashad Washington Jr., Jason Nathaniel, and Mekhi Lowry all give between 5 and 7 rebounds per game. Lowry comes over from Towson. He's also giving you about 3.5 assists per game, and on the other end, this is a Yale team that's just incredibly efficient on offense. A top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Yale, not necessarily a super up-tempo team, though. As a matter of fact, they're 338th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got an Illinois Chicago team that they're not necessarily gunning it. They're not necessarily slow, 137th in terms of total possessions per game. But for Yale, you've got Nick Townsend, who's going to be the best player in this game. 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, 4.5 assists, like 6'6", 6'7", shooting 56% from 3. And Yale's right now shooting 43.9% from 3. I think that you continue to see a little bit of regression there. They do a nice job running their stuff. They're only turning the ball over 9.3 times per game, so they keep things clean. They have been outside the top 230, though, in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, so they do leave themselves a little bit vulnerable there. They should be able to do a nice job down low with Isaac Selskar being able to give you 14 points, 4.5 boards, and then you've had Samson Allerton be able to give you 2 blocks down low, a steal, so he's done a nice job as a little bit of a mix and shake defensive player. He's missed a few games this far this season, but should be all good to go for this one. But that said, even though Yale is incredibly efficient, I do think that this number has gone a little bit too high, and I do think that with Illinois Chicago, they're going to be able to get a few more clean possessions than what they're used to. It's going to be a slow and control game, so I did set my total at 151.5 here at the 152. I like the under, and I'm willing to take 12 plus here with Illinois Chicago. 763, 764 on the card. It is St. Peter's, St. Playos, and Niagara. Niagara is an underdog of 5.5 points, 131 after 132 is the total, and set a total of a 132.5. I'm going to be in on the over. You do have two teams that are really not going to be looking to push a lot of tempo. Niagara back outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and this is a St. Peter's squad that right now is about 310th of the country in terms of total possessions per game, but St. Peter's uncharacteristically well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this Niagara defense, man. I mean, just because you play slow, and that's indicated by the fact that they're giving up fewer than 80 points per game, doesn't mean that you play great defense. They're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Niagara can't get a second or third chance to save their lives. This team is right now a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They return pretty much one player from a season ago, Justin Page, who's been on page to give you the most scoring for this team, 11 points, 2.5 assists per game, but this team is outside the top 200 in terms of ball security as well. They shoot 30% from 3. They're outside the top 300 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and they're allowing teams to shoot 38% from 3-point range. I think that that'll see some positivity, mainly because St. Peter's is not necessarily a team that's going to go into flamethrower mode from 3-point range, but for the St. Peter's team, I expect some positivity with the fact that they're shooting 29.5% from 3. You've got Brett Bland, who's done a nice job, giving you a 16.5 points, shooting 39% from the outside. Bryson Eaton, he was last year a relatively good 3-point shooter, only shooting about 29.5% from 3, but still supplying the team with 9 points, 3.5 assists per game. St. Peter's doing an okay job keeping the ball just clean and not turning it over, 11.5 turnovers per game. Typically, they have some issues there, and this St. Peter's team is actually second in the country in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. They're shooting about 81.5% the free throw line. That has been an issue for them time and time again. They're right now a bottom 15 team in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. Do think that goes northward. And St. Peter's is allowing teams to shoot 38.9% from 3. Again, I do think that you see some positivity there, but there's no question about it. Even though these two teams are slow, they're just not the same teams defensively that they have been in the past, but I have a lot more faith in St. Peter's being able to win this game down low. Niagara has absolutely no size whatsoever, and at the very least for the St. Peter's team, you've been able to get about 5.5 rebounds out of Ja'Kai Gupton, who's been able to supply 6 points, steal and a half per contest, and then Jaquan Ewing has done a nice job being able to supply this team with about 5 rebounds per game. I just feel like this is a Niagara team that is not going to be able to get online with really anything whatsoever, and I do think that St. Peter's going to be able to get the job done here. I did set St. Peter's as a favorite of 10.5 points at the 5.5. I'm certainly willing to lay it, and maybe my total a 132.5. I'm also going to be on this total over 765, 766 on the card. Utah State is on the road against Charlotte. Charlotte is a home underdog of 10.5 points. 143.5 is the total, and with Utah State, I set them as a favorite of 8.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Charlotte. The Charlotte squad has actually been able to do a pretty solid job on the glass, and you've got a Utah State team that had to travel multiple time zones for this, and this is pretty much going to be their second game, and I believe the last 4 or 5 days out east as they had to play that game against South Florida. That was their first loss of the season. So Utah State team that's firing on all cylinders, top 75 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're going to have the most explosive player in this game in MJ Collins, 21 points, a steal, shooting 50% from 3, and Utah State as a whole, they're shooting 38.2% from 3, but a little bit vulnerable with their perimeter defense as well. They're outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, going against a Charlotte unit that has been much improved from the outside. They're shooting 35% for 3. Now, Charlotte has honestly been a team that, despite the fact that they play slow, they're well outside the top 280 in terms of total possessions per game. Not the best team defensively themselves. They're outside the top 255 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 240 in both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, but this is a Charlotte team that's doing a great job on the glass. They are a top 100 team in terms of rebound percentage. Big reason why is Anton Bonke, who comes over from Providence, 11.5 points, 8.5 boards, 2 blocks per contest as a true 7-footer, and the offense has been quite clean. Dezane Mingo comes over from Marshall, about 4 boards, 4 assists, 7 points per contest. Not a great 3-point shooter, but Major Freeman, who comes over from Siena, he has been a major add, 39.5% 3-point shooter with about 9 points per game. Ben Bradford is right now giving you about 15 points per game. Charlotte has has been able to do a much better job in terms of running clean offense with the way that they're getting those second and third chances. Unlike last year, they're able to shoot it a little bit from 3-point range. So even though you're going to get a relatively slow and controlled game, as this Utah State team, they're not really looking to play super slow. They're not really looking to play super fast in terms of total possessions per game. They're checking in about 103rd in all of college basketball. I do think that Charlotte going to be able to hold in there. I did set a total here of a 144.5, so at the 143.5, like the over and the points for Charlotte. 767, 768 on the card. Sacred Heart plays those to Iona. Iona is a 1-point favorite to a 1-point dog, depending upon where you look. Seeing some pick'ems out there as well. 163.5 is the total, and I did set a total of a 163.5, so going to be looking for a little bit of movement here, 163 or less, in on the over, 164 or higher the under, and I did set Iona as the 1.5-point favorite, so want to lay a point, take them as a pick'em. If they become a money line underdog, all the better. I'll take that money line price, but that said, with this Iona squad, you did expect a little bit of regression with the fact that a few games ago, they were allowing teams to shoot less than 25% from 3-point range. They're still only allowing teams to shoot 27.8% from the outside, but I've really loved what I've seen out of CJ Anthony. Began his career at Cincinnati, could never really get out there on the floor, but he has found a home here. 16 points, 6 assists, a steal, shooting 39.5% from 3. It's an Iona team that is very good on the outside. Kashawn Williams, who's a really nice scorer over at Northern Illinois many years ago, 10 points, shooting 40% from 3. Toby Harris is shooting 43.5% from the outside, and this Iona team, they just need to do a better job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. They're outside the top 320 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You do have a Sacred Heart team that should be able to win that battle down low, especially with having the 6'8/6'9" combo player in Anquan Hill. 15.5 points, 6 rebounds, and he was a 40% three-point shooter last season. That's taken a little bit of a tumble this year, but I do think that that'll be going northward. And you've got Deshaun Giddens, who comes over from Florida National right now, supplying 16.5 points, 2.5 steals per game. It's a Sacred Heart team that has been quite a bit better in terms of generating turnovers this year. Top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this Sacred Heart team is taking over 50% of their shots from 3-point range, and they're shooting 37% from 3, with Niall Ralph Byer really being that main man, shooting 48.5% from 3, 10.5 points per game, and Jan Farrell shooting 47.5% from 3 with 10 points per game. He's never quite been that great of a 3-point shooter, but I do think that for this Iona team, even though they're going to have a little bit of a tough time on the glass, the fact that this is a Sacred Heart team that turns the ball over about 13.5 times per game, that's an issue. And while Sacred Heart does a nice job with their own 3-point shooting, they're allowing teams to shoot 39.5% for 3. That should see a little bit of positivity, but they were outside the top 3 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. So I do think that you're going to be able to get quite a bit of an up and down game. Sacred Heart not necessarily playing at warp speed, but certainly playing fast, 130th in terms of total possessions per game. Iona's 29th in terms of total possessions per game. So set a total of 163.5, 163 or less, and on the over, 164 or higher the under, and with Iona as a pick'em money line underdog / 1-point favorite, one to back them. 769, 770 on the card. It is Marist, and they are going to be playing host to Manhattan. Manhattan is a underdog of 8.5 points on this game. It is 141.5, and with Manhattan, I did set them as an underdog of 7.5 points. So at the A+, I'm going to be willing to take the points. This is a Marist team that once again is doing a rock solid job with their defense down low, and once again is playing very slowly. Marist outside the top 285 in terms of total possessions per game. Manhattan's in the top 100, but a little bit of a warp stat. That overtime game against Wagner causes the possessions to look a little bit larger than what they are, and this is a Marist team that has allowing teams to shoot right now only about 22.5% from 3-point range. That's going to be going northward, but still, this is a team that year in and year out, top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You're back in the top 75 this season. Rajon Blackwell has been a nice pickup from the non-D1 ranks, 14 points, shooting 38% from 3. Marist, not a great, but not a terrible 3-point shooting team at about 33.8% from the outside, and then you've got a versatile point guard in Justin Bernard doing a little bit of everything. 9.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 2 steals, shooting about 34.5% from 3-point range. You don't necessarily have that one dominant rebounder either for Marist. It's just by committee. Jaden Daughtry, right now, that top rebounder with about 5.3 boards per game, and for Manhattan, they've been in a little bit of transition with Will Sidner right now being ineligible. We'll see if he gets out there at all on the floor this season, and Brett Ruppel has been dealing with injury, but this backcourt has been solid. Devin Dinkins, Jaden Winston, these two guys are combining for about 30 points per game between the two of them, about 5.8 assists per game. It is a Manhattan squad that is allowing a lot of second and third chances. They're outside the top 330 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Should be some positivity with allowing teams to shoot 39% from 3. I recognize that this is not a great defense, but I feel like they're better than being outside the top 320 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Frazier Knight at the Roxborough last year shot over 45% from 3. Right now at 6'7", 37% 3-point shooter, 13.7 rebounds per game. You've been able to have Marko Lubicic be able to come in, give you about 6.5 points. He's been able to give you some nice versatility, and I do think that the overall backcourt power play is going to allow Manhattan to be able to remain lively. I do think the Manhattan at their core, a little bit of a slower team than what they've shown through thus far this season, but certainly a pretty solid offense in terms of backcourt. So I did set my line at 7.5 at 8+. Won't take the points with the Manhattan. I did set a total of a 139.5, so you're at 141.5. I'm also in on the under. 771, 772 on the card. It is Rider. They're on the road against Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac is a 15.5 point favorite. Total scheme between 149 to 149.5. So Quinnipiac is a 17.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay it. This Rider team is outside the top 3 in terms of both points scored and points a lot on a per possession basis. It's really, really not good. And the Rider offense is really, really, really not good. 363rd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And they just don't have any rebounding as well. You lose the Ingrams from last season. So, you've had Caleb Smith at 6'5", be able to give you about 8.3 boards, 9.5 points per game. He's the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Flash Burton, Zion Cruz are back from the backcourt from a season ago. Both are giving you between 11 to 11.5 points per game, but both are shooting less than 29.5% from 3. Rider's shooting 25% from 3-point range. Each of their top 7 scorers are shooting below 30% from the outside. It's really not good for this team. And I do think that it improves a little bit, but they're also not generating turnovers on defense. They're outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is a Quinnipiac team that over the years has had a little bit of a tough time in terms of just taking care of the ball. They're more of a middle of the road team in terms of that this season, and we should see their 38% three-point shooting go downward a little bit, but they're doing a nice job guarding the perimeter. Quinnipiac only allowing teams to shoot about 30.5% from 3, and Amari Monroe hasn't even been as good as he was a season ago. Last year, 18 points, 9 boards per contest. This year, he's generating 3 steals per game, but more like 15 points, 6.5 boards, and he's only shooting 27% from 3, but Keith, give me just one more. McKnight has been able to give you 40% three-point shooting, 11 points per game. Jane Zimmerman, 17 points. He's only shooting about 30% from 3. This has been a Quinnipiac team that's done a nice job facilitating by committee, as you've had Ty Turnage along with Esom Jones. Jones comes over from Florida National. Both give you between about 3.5 to 4 assists per contest, and I do think that for Quinnipiac, they're going to do a nice job in terms of taking it to a Rider team that doesn't have a lot of size. They have not really been able to get a whole heck of a lot of anything going whatsoever, and if you could get anything out of Ronald Giles, who began his career over at St. Francis and Prairie View, for this Quinnipiac team, all the better for them. So I did set Quinnipiac here as a favorite of 17.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it, and with regards to the total, I set mine at a 145.5. I just don't think Rider does their part with the total, so I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Quinnipiac. 773, 774 on the card. Siena is going to be playing against Canisius. Canisius is an underdog of 16.5 to 17.5 points. 130.5 is the total, and I said Siena is a 14.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You've got 2 of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Canisius, for much of the season, has been 363rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're down to about 364th, second slowest in the country. Siena, they're checking in outside the top 295 in terms of total possessions per game. As a matter of fact, they're down to now 349. So you've got 2 very slow and controlled teams. I am on the over, though, as neither defense has necessarily been super duper efficient. Siena's been halfway okay. This Canisius team is well outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as they've actually done a nice job in terms of guarding the 3. With Canisius, teams are shooting less than 32% from 3 against them, but they're outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Canisius has been playing relatively even up on the glass, but they're not generating any turnovers whatsoever outside the top 300 with that regard, so nice clean possessions to be had here. But for this Canisius team, you've got Khalil Singleton, who comes over from Holy Cross, and Brian Jonga, who comes over from Central Michigan. Both give you about 12 points per contest, and with Jonga, he's been able to shoot 39% for 3, Singleton 37.5% from the outside. After Canisius last year was a top 80 team in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, they just don't have a lot of ability to be able to force turnovers on defense, and you've got to see on a team that I think that they're going to start to heat up a little bit more with their outside shooting. Right now, this team is shooting as a collective 28.1% from 3-point range. Are they a great 3-point shooting team? No, but I have to think that these guys are a little bit better. You bring back Justice Schultz from a season ago, 13 points, 5 assists per game, and last season for Schultz, he shot about 29% from 3. He's down to 20% this year. Again, is he a great 3-point shooter? No, I think he's better than 20%, though. You've got Brandon Coyle, who's right now shooting 32% from 3, 10 points, 4.5 boards. You've had Hasman Goodrick come in to be able to give you about 11 points, 8 boards as a 6'10" do-it-all player from Australia. Missed a little bit of time due to injury. He's been able to breathe some life into this offense as well, and he's been able to supply 12-plus points in 2 out of the last 3 games as well. It is a Siena unit that has been able to do a solid job with regards to turnover battle, top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and not allowing a lot of second and third chances either. Top 100 team team with regards to defensive rebound percentage. I do think that the overall shooting, though, of Canisius, the way that they keep things relatively clean on offense, so they don't really force a lot of turnovers on defense, does just enough to help them hold in this game that I think is going to be quite slow and controlled. So did set a line of a 14.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Canisius, and I'm in on the over. So my total 132.5, 775, 776. UTSA meet for the Roadrunners are on the road against Alabama. Alabama 32.5 point favorites. 166.5 is the total, and I did set Alabama is a 27.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with UT San Antonio. I think a little bit of mercy is going to be shown in this game because with UTSA, you've got head coach Austin Clonch, who 2 years ago was actually an assistant over at Alabama. He actually resigned from Nichols as the head coach to become an assistant at Alabama. I think that Nate Oates is going to do him a little bit of a solid here, so that's a little bit of inside baseball. And for UTSA, this has been a pretty disappointing start to the season for them. They're not really turning the ball over a lot. They're keeping things clean, and they're giving themselves second chances. For UTSA, they're actually a top 75 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. You're only turning the ball over 10.5 times per game. Outside the top 275 in terms of three-point shooting percentage, two-point shooting percentage, and free throw shooting percentage. So they just simply can't shoot. Austin Nunez, who began his career over at Arizona State, has been able to give you about 9 points, 2.5 assists per game. They've really been looking for someone to help out Jameer Simpson, who's been the head of the snake, 18.5 points, a steal, 5 rebounds, shooting 40% from three, and everyone not named Jameer Simpson is pretty much shooting 31% or worse from three-point range, so that's not been great. But for this UTSA team, better on the glass, with Caden Rayfield being able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Bob Kerr and Jai has been able to give you about 6 boards, and this is an Alabama team that isn't going to completely blitz you on the glass, so I do like the fact that you bring in the Tarleton transfer in Kenton Briso, who missed a little bit of time to begin the season, and he's given them some life down low, about 7 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. You've got LeBaron Filan, who's been one of the better guards in all of college basketball, 21.5 points, 5.5 assists per game. As we know, Alabama loves to go bombs away from three, and right now they're shooting 36.5% from three. Taylor Bolbowen, who stands right around 6'10", he's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three. He's giving you 11 points per game, and with Alabama, just so much versatility. Houston Mallett, Latrell Wright's all been able to combine for about 19.5 points per game. That said, I do think that this is, again, a little bit too lofty of a number, especially with Alabama being well outside the top 330 in terms of generating turnovers. UTSA going to be able to find some nice clean possessions, and Alabama's been outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So I do think that UTSA finds a way to hold in there. UTSA at their core, they're typically an up-tempo team. They have slowed themselves down quite a bit this year currently in terms of total possessions per game. They're checking in more in that neighborhood about 200th. I think that cranks up, and as we know, Alabama won the most up-tempo team in all of college basketball at 15. So set a total of 171.5. I'm going to be in on the points here with UTSA, and I do like the over. 777, 778 on the card. St. Mary's is on the road against Davidson. Davidson 8.5 to a 9.5 point home underdog. So on this game, it is 138.5, and I set a line of 5.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Davidson. This is going to be a very slow and controlled game. St. Mary's has actually been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. When you think St. Mary's, you think of really good, just in-your-grill defense and them being able to hit the boards, and that certainly is still all there with St. Mary's, but I mean, it's a St. Mary's team that in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, they're actually 57th in all of college basketball, and this is a Davidson team as well outside the top 10 in terms of total possessions per game. They're about 93rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. This is a Davidson team that they really don't give themselves any sort of second and third chances. They are going to get completely blitzed on the glasses for Davidson right now. They are outside the top 340 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They're not allowing opponents to grab a lot of second and third chances. I might see a reversal going against the St. Mary's team that you've got Paulius Marsoukas, who's giving you 15 plus points, 8 plus rebounds per game. Andrew McKeever has been able to give you 10 rebounds per game. So those guys have been rock solid, but we've got a lot of versatile pieces with this Davidson team, as well as you've got Nick Koval, Hunter Adam, and Josh Govins all being able to provide between 10 and 11 points per game. And Adam has been able to shoot over 51% from three-point range. I think that that's going to be going downward. And he's been a little bit limited in the past few games as well. He only played 11 minutes in that game against the Citadel. He's been dealing with a little bit of ailment, so something to take note of there. But I do think that Sam Brown, who comes over from Penn, is going to be able to get it going a little bit more as well. Only about 9.5 points, 2.5 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from three. Last year at Penn, he was averaging more like 14 points per game. And for St. Mary's, they've got one of the most underrated shooters that you're going to find in all of college basketball, and that would be Mikey Lewis. This guy has been just absolutely on fire this year. 17.5 points. Right now shooting 49% from three. That might see a downward tick, but I could see him shooting 46+% from three for the entirety of the season. He is that good. And then you've been able to get some good production as well out of Joshua Dent, who he was an afterthought last season. 11.5 points, 4.5 assists. He stepped up in a big way. St. Mary's is turning the ball over about 12 times per game, but shooting over 40% from three-point range. They give themselves all those second and third chances. They're back in the top 50 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. But with this Davidson team, I do think that they do just enough to be able to hold in there. It's a St. Mary's team that is very stout with both their 2-point and 3-point shooting defense. They're in the top 50 in both regards. They're not going to generate a lot of turnovers, so should be able to see some clean possessions here for Davidson. I think that you get some late game fouling. I set my total at a 137.5 here at the 138.5. Just don't think you get quite enough possessions for the over, so in on the under and the points with Davidson. 779, 780 on the card. Texas Tech, they play us at LSU. This is from Dickies Arena, so out there in the state of Texas, so neutral court game, but in the state of Texas, Texas Tech 4 to 4.5 point favorites. Total on this game, it is 150.5, and with Texas Tech, I set them as a 4-point favorite, so 4.5 does become my buy point on LSU. This LSU team has been really tremendous on offense. I recognize that they got slowed down a little bit in that game that we saw against Drake a few nights ago, but still, this team is clocking in 10th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for Texas Tech, they are going to have the best player out there on the floor as JT Toppin. He has been incredible, 20-plus points, 9-plus rebounds, he's giving you blocks, he's been able to shoot a little bit from three-point range as well, but Texas Tech has not been quite the same team on offense that we've seen in the past. They are about 73rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The backcourt takes a little bit of a fall off with losing the likes of Darian Williams and company. Christian Anderson has been that main guy. He's been able to give you 18 points and about 7 assists per game, which sounds amazing, but he's been a little bit of an all-or-nothing guy, and if you don't have him getting it going, you just don't have a lot of reliability outside that. Tyree Bryan, who comes over from Santa Clara, he's been only able to shoot about 27% from 3, 6.5 points, 4.5 boards. You need more there. Lawan Watts has had some big games for this team, 11.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and he's shooting in the mid-30s from 3, and Donovan Atwell has been able to shoot 44% from the outside, but Texas Tech, also, they've been relying upon their second and third chances for a lot of production, with JT Toppin obviously leading the way. Top 35 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and I do think that LSU is going to be able to stand up to them a little bit. We were talking about this team with our good friend Blake Lovell, and certainly it is a case where losing Jalen Reed is rough for the team, but you've got Michael Nwoko down low, giving you about 16.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. It is an LSU team that has been outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so that's a little bit of a concern, but they still have been a good overall rebounding team, as you've got De'Don Thomas, who's been running good, clean offense, 15.5 points, 7 assists, a 1.4 turnovers per game. He's only shooting 26% from 3, shot in the mid-30s over at UNLV. That should be going northward, but Markel Sutton coming over from Omaha has been a really nice find as well. 9 boards, 13.5 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. You've had Robert Miller do a nice job with just a little bit of this and that with about 7.5 points, 3.5 boards. I do think that this LSU team has the size to be able to stand up to Toppin. Toppin's still going to be the best player in this game. There's no question about it, but with this LSU squad, the way that they've been able to do a nice job in terms of just really shutting things down low, top 35 team and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and Texas Tech being hit or miss from 3-point range, I think that that allows LSU to hold in there, and this is an LSU team that they just have had the same tempo every single year under Matt McMahon. Fast, but not overly fast. They're about 98th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I think that you get some late game fouling. So, set a total of 154. I like the over, and the points at 4.5 plus here with LSU. 781, 782 on the card. Central Michigan is on the road against St. Louis, and St. Louis a sizable favorite here of 23.5 points. 155 to 155.5 is the total, and set a line of 19.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Central Michigan. Central Michigan did something that I absolutely love in the offseason. You bring in a highly successful Division II coach to try to turn the tide, and Andy Brockma, he's brought a few guys from the D2 ranks with him, like a Nathan Klebot, who's been your main scorer with about 12.7 boards, a true 7-footer, and for Central Michigan, maybe this isn't a team that's going to completely knock your socks off or anything like that, but they've been more respectable on defense. They're a top 175 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. They've been able to do a solid job as well in terms of the rebound battle as well. They've been a top 200 team with regards to rebound percentage, despite the fact that you've got a lot of D2 guys that come up, and typically that means a little bit less size, but they bring in a Michigan transfer in Fat Brooks, that's his actual name, give me 9.5 points, 3.5 assists per game. They do need to clean up the turnovers with about 13.5 turnovers per game, but this is a St. Louis team that, as well, they've been having some tough times in terms of taking care of the ball, and that's really the one issue that you got for St. Louis. They're a top 45 team in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're shooting over 82% the free throw line. If they're not number one, they're in the top 2 with regards to their free throw shooting percentage. Top 35 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. They're shooting 35% from 3, but 15.5 turnovers per game. They're outside the top 320 in terms of that ball security, and that's with Robbie Avila cleaning up the turnovers that really ailed him from the season ago. 13.5 points. He's right now shooting 48% from 3-point range. I'll see a little bit of regression, but you've had Amari McCautry get off to a nice start to begin the season. He's cooled down a little bit, but still 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, like what I'm seeing there. Deion Brown, he comes over from UMBC in Boston College, 12.5 points, 7 rebounds. He's been able to do a rock solid job, but you just need to have a little little bit more security with the ball. And Central Michigan, they're outside the top 175 in terms of generating turnovers, but I think that they do an okay job of being able to hold up here. It's a St. Louis team that has been a top 75 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage as well. But I think that Central Michigan, with having Kleebot down low, being able to give you some size at 7 feet tall, it does just enough for this team to remain lively. And I do think that you're going to see some good efficiency on offense. Central Michigan has been outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. St. Louis looking to gun it a little bit more, and they've been highly efficient on the offensive side. I think so. I did set my total at 157.5. I do like the over, and I do like the points with Central Michigan. 783, 784 on the card. Samford plays also UNLV. UNLV is an underdog of 9 to 9.5 points. 163.5 is a total, and I set a total of a 160. I'm going to be in on the under. I think that UNLV is going to start to slow themselves down a little bit more because, it's just been a lot of attrition for this team. You have not gotten some of your key players out there on the floor thus far this season, and I don't think that they're going to be able to get their true 7-footer out there at all this season. And Emmanuel Stevens, who transferred in from Arizona State, Miles Che, has yet to play this season. It looks like he might not be back for quite some time, and the moment that he comes back, he's probably not going to be 100%. You've had, though, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn along Kamani Hamilton be really good in terms of supplying the boom for the scene. They're combining for about 30 points per contest. Hamilton at 6'7". He's been able to give you about 5.5 boards, 2 assists per game. The main facilitator has been Howie Fleming, who comes over from UT Rio Grande Valley. He's been around the block. He's been able to give you 8.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, and this is a pretty solid team in terms of rebounding by committee, but for this UNLV team, they have also been awful on defense. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're allowing teams to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Not absolutely terrible, but you'd like to see it be a little bit better, and for Samford, they certainly should be able to win this turnover battle. As for Samford, they've had one of the most underrated freshmen in all of college basketball really be able to step up, in Abuka Okore, 21.5 points, 3 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. He's done a great job in terms of putting the team on his back and helping the team run good, clean offense. For Samford, they are inside the top 245 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Samford not allowing second and third chances. Top 15 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. With Samford, they're allowing teams to shoot about 36% from 3. I do think that we should see a little bit of positivity with that regard, but then you got Benny Gieler along Chisholm Okpara, who returned from a season ago, combining for about 26 points per game. Okpara at 6'8", he's been able to give you about 2 assists, a steal, some good versatility there. And Gieler, he's been able to do a nice job in terms of giving out 2.5 assists per contest as well. It's a Samford team that's playing quite a bit more quickly than you typically see under Kyle Smith. Typically, the nerd ball style has this team playing very slow and controlled. Right now for Samford, about 114th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. UNLV has been playing, in my opinion, too fast for their own good, 17th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that Samford going to be able to get this game played a little bit more at their tenor, so I did set my line with regards to the total at a 160. I'm in on the under, and Samford set them as a 10-point favorite, going to be willing to lay the 9 to 9.5. 785, 786 on the card. Pittsburgh plays us Hofstra, and the pride of Hofstra is a 7.5 point underdog. 133.5 is the total line. With Pittsburgh, I set them as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Hofstra. They were actually number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage last season. We've seen that let up a little bit more, and then with regards to this Pittsburgh team, you've been able to get really good production out of Cameron Corn down low. About 15 points, 9.5 boards. You should be able to dominate this game on the post. And then DeMarco Minor has been very major. He already has a buzzer beater on his resume, about 4 boards, 3 assists, steal and a half, 12 points per contest, shooting 41% from 3-point range. Omari Weatherspoon has been a nice guard for the team. It's cooled down with his 3-point shooting, but still giving you about 8 points per game. And for Pittsburgh, they don't really generate a lot of turnovers. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis. They're very much looking to win things down low. Top 100 team in terms of block shot percentage. Top 100 team in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, Hofstra is a team that very much runs things much more through their backcourt, as Cruz Davis has been supplying the team with 19.5 points, 5 assists, shooting 43% from 3. And Preston Eadman has been a nice number 2 second fiddle, 5 assists, 15 points per game. He only shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but it is a Hofstra team that they do leave themselves very vulnerable on the glass. They've been outside the top 200 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They've actually been good in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage defense. Once again, top 75 team with that regard, but it is a Hofstra team that is outside the top 175 in terms of ball security as well. I do think that Pittsburgh finds a way to be able to get the job done against a Hofstra team that, outside of really your main guys, we've got James Patterson, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points per game. He's been able to throw in there about 5 rebounds per game, and then you've got Victory Ontinu, who's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. But outside of really that main core 5 and 1 or 2 guys coming in off the bench, you don't have a ton. I do think that the depth of Pittsburgh just wins out in this spot. I did set my line at a 9.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Hofstra has been a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Pittsburgh is right now outside the top 300, but I do think that for Pittsburgh Pittsburgh, they do find their sea legs on offense. I did set a total here of a 141.5. I'm going to be in on the over. 787, 788 on the card. Mississippi State and San Francisco do battle from Cadence Bank Arena. So neutral court game, which Mississippi State is a 5 to 5.5 point favorite in. 146.5 to 147 is the total in. For Mississippi State, going south of Miss, 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one take the points with San Francisco. This has been a defense that year in and year out has been a top 55 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you just have a Mississippi State team that has been rather lackluster in terms of their offense. They're currently 165th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. There has not been a single season under Chris James in which Mississippi State has been above 270th in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. They look like they're going to be able to break that this year, but they're still outside the top 225 right now. You've had Josh Hubbard and Jaden Epps be really nice at the backcourt. Epps is able to give you about 15 points, shooting 37.5% from three. Hubbard, 23.5 points, 4.5 assists, steal 1.5. He's shooting 35% from three, but the turnovers are an issue for Mississippi State outside the top 200 in terms of ball security, and Mississippi State has really cranked up the tempo. This is currently a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Dons of San Francisco team that's very much looking to slow things down. They're 274th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for San Francisco, they should be able to do a pretty solid job down low against a Mississippi State team that uncharacteristically isn't the world's greatest on glass. Quincy Ballard comes over from Wichita State, a block, 6.5 boards, 7.5 points per game, and Sean Jones has we give you about 6 rebounds per game as well. But for San Francisco, the overall versatility of Mookie Cook, a former top 75 recruit, has been very solid. Currently shooting over 50% from three-point range. That should be going downward, but 12 points, 5 boards, a steal, a block per contest, and then David Fuchs, who comes over from Rhode Island, has been nice on the glass, 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and Ryan Beasley has been a little bit hot and cold this year, but he's been able to keep things relatively clean with about 13 points per game. It is a San Francisco team that has been turning the ball over 13 times per game themselves. They've been outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, but this team has been very nice at hunkering down inside, top 35 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and I do think that with the Dons, they do a nice job holding in there against a Mississippi State team that, again, it just feels like they're playing a little bit too fast for their own good. And I do think that with San Francisco right now shooting 38% for three, and Mississippi State being outside the top 100 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, San Francisco does a nice job of holding in there. Set a total of a 146.5. I think that San Francisco gets things slowed down a little bit, so at the 147 in on the under and the points with the Dons. 789, 790 on the card. Central Florida plays host to Towson. Towson is an underdog of 8.5 to 9 points. 147.5 to 148 is the total, and I said Towson as a underdog of 8.5 points. So here at the 9, I'm going to be willing to take those points. It's a battle of tempos in this game as well. You've got a Towson team that's looking to play as slow as all heck. They're 61st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Central Florida, just like last year, they're gunning it the 100th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but it's a Towson team that remains in the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And with this UCF team, I do think that we're going to see a bit more of a cool down with their three-point shooting. Right now, they're shooting 39.7% from three-point, and it's a good three-point shooting team, but Riley Kugel, who I remember had a nice run at Florida a few years ago with his scoring, 15.5 points, 50% three-point shooting, I don't think is necessarily sustainable, and their top 5 scorers for Central Florida, all but one of them are shooting at least 40% from three-point, with Jordan Burks being the outlier, giving you about 13 points per game. Now, Central Florida much stronger on the glass than in past season with Michael Stillwell coming over from UW Milwaukee, and he's been really versatile. 12 points, 9 boards, 2 assists, stealing an upper contest, shooting over 40% from three, and for Central Florida, top 35 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Also is a Central Florida team that has been okay with regards to their defense. They're just a hair outside the top 100 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not going to generate a ton of turnovers against a Towson group that they do a nice job in terms of just setting up good, clean offense, and they absolutely dominate the boards as well. Towson, a top 75 team in terms of their defensive rebound and offensive rebound percentage as well. You've got Jack Dombia, who's been able to give you 12 points, 5.5 boards per contest. Heather Tejada has actually been your main rebounder with about 6 boards, 19.5 points per game, and he doesn't give you like any scoring whatsoever. But Caleb Mbea, 2.3 points and 6.1 boards with a steal per contest. He just does the little things well. That's what makes this Towson team just such a tough customer. They have a lot of guys that they buy into a defensive-oriented approach. Towson is a top 80 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. They've been incredible on the glass, and I think that allows this Towson team to be able to get this game slow down and for them to be able to hold in there. Here at the 9, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Towson, and I'm in on the under semi-total at a 142.5, 791, 782 on the card. Middle Tennessee is playing us to Belmont. Belmont is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite to this game. It is 152.5, and with Belmont, I set them as a 1.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on Middle Tennessee on the money line. For Belmont, you've got two really versatile, like 6'7", 6'8", sort of combo players in Tyler Lundblade along with Sam Orme. These two guys have been able to combine for about 30 to 31.5 points per contest, with Orme shooting 35% from three-point range, been the main rebounder with about 7 boards and a steal per contest. Lundblade, a little bit more of a three-point shooting specialist. He's taking nearly 10 threes per game, and he's shooting 37.9% from three-point range for a Belmont team that is doing a lot of things right on offense. They're also a top 15 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. They do turn the ball over a lot, though. They're outside the top 270 in terms of ball security. This is a Belmont team that last year, they were gunning it with regards to their tempo. They've dialed it back a little bit more this year, but still about 67th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Flip side, you've got a Middle Tennessee team that they're playing a little bit more quickly than they have in the past. Middle Tennessee right now, in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in more around about 197th in all of college basketball, but for this Middle Tennessee team, they always do a nice job in terms of guarding the perimeter. Now, their perimeter shooting has also been leaving a lot to be desired, as right now your main man has been Mr. Jalen Carter, who's been able to give you about 13 points, 3.5 assists per game. You've got Torrey Ellison and Kamari Lands back from a season ago. They're combining for about 24.5 points per game, and Lands has been able to shoot 34% from three-point range. He's been able to do it about 2 assists per game, and if you look overall, the team is shooting 35.5% from three-point range. Much of that has come against their teams that they played in non-D1 competition, as they play against like Weber and Mulligan, and that allowed them to be able to put up some nice numbers. But that said, this has been a Middle Tennessee team that as well has done a pretty solid job in terms of giving themselves second at their chances, a top 175 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. And with this Belmont team having a tough time being able to take care of the ball, Middle Tennessee has been middle of the road in terms of generating turnovers, not quite the same as they have been a season ago, but way that they are allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. I think that allows Middle Tennessee to get the job done. What I think is going to be an up-and-down game. Belmont has been improved with their defense. Last year, they were outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, or a top 150 unit this year, but I do think that Middle Tennessee is starting to gain some confidence from three-point range, and I do think that they're going to be able to turn those turnovers into offense. Semi-total 157.5. I do like the over and Middle Tennessee on the money line. 783, 784 on the card. Washington State plays host to Nevada, and Nevada finds themselves as a slim favorite of 2 to 2.5 points. 154 to 154.5 is the total. Set my line at 2.5. So 2 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Nevada. It's a Nevada squad that last year was one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. And once again, not necessarily a team that's really going to be looking to gun it. They have sped themselves up a little bit from a season ago. Currently, they're about 226th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this Washington State system typically is very up-tempo under Coach Riley. They've really dialed it back this year. They're about 246th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but on this Washington State team, they've been able to do a much better job in terms of taking care of the ball than a season ago, outside the top 3 in terms of ball security last year. 13 turnovers per game, still not ideal, but it's a little bit better, and you always get good three-point shooting with this team. Their shooting is collective about 35.5% from the outside, with Emili Yalalo being able to give you 9.5 points, and he's shooting 48% from 3. And then Ace Glass, some sort of like car company needs to be able to sign this guy up, like perhaps Safelite. I mean, he's shooting 42% from 3, 17.5 points per game at a 40-point game out there at Maui, but I mean, it's a little bit mix and match from there, and it's a Washington State team that certainly has their warts, as they're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They are outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they're not generating a lot of turnovers. So Nevada, in my opinion, should be a little bit of a favorite, because I do think that while you got Emmanuel Ugbo down low for this Washington State team, give you about 6 rebounds per game. Elijah Price is going to be able to take it to him, 12 points, 8 rebounds per game, and then you've got Joel Armitrain, who really doesn't give you a lot of scoring with about 6 points per contest, but doing a solid job with 5 rebounds per game. He should be able to do a nice job on that front end. Though this is the Nevada team, doesn't necessarily play fast. They make the most out of their possessions. Only about 9.5 turnovers per game, top 50 team in terms of ball security. It's a Nevada team that is once again a top 100 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage. Nevada's also given that up from 3. Teams are shooting over 35% from the outside against them, but you've got Tyshawn Comer and Corey Camper in the backcourt combining for a little bit over 31 points per game, and you've got Camper shooting 37% from 3, comes in from UTEP. He's been able to generate about a steal per contest. And then Chuck Bailey has been a nice, just a little bit of a mixer and shaker. 7.5 points, 4 boards. He's shooting in the high 30s from three-point range. I do think that Nevada goes on the road. I know that Pullman is a tough place to play, but gets the job done. I do think that you're going to be able to get some late game fouling with regards to this total as well. So I set mine at a 154.5. Here at the 154, I'm in on the over. And with Nevada, I'm willing to lay up to a deuce with them. 795, 796 on the card. Nebraska plays us to Creighton, and Creighton finds themselves as an underdog in this battle of 4 to 4.5 points. 152.5 is the total. And with Creighton, I did set them as an underdog of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Nebraska. Nebraska has been just a really well-rounded team. They're in the top 65 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. About 113th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're really not allowing teams to get to the free throw line. Top 25 team in terms of not allowing free throw attempts, and they're pushing everything to the outside. Teams are attempting more 3-point shots on Nebraska rather than 2-point shots because you do have a man down low in Rink Mass who's been able to take over games. 18 points, 3.5 assists, 6.5 rebounds at about 6'9", and he's been able to shoot 43% from 3-point range. Jamarcus Lawrence has been rock solid as well, shooting 45.5% from the outside, 9 points per game. Connor Esiason has pretty much been lifted from the starting lineup. He just hasn't been able to give you too much, and that's a good thing because you never knew what you would get out of Connor Esiason. Now you've got Peay Samford, who's a little bit more reliable, 16.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists. He's shooting 37% from 3-point range for a Nebraska team that as a whole, they're neither here nor there with their 3-point shooting. They're shooting about 34.5% from the outside. They're not necessarily a team that's grabbing a lot of second or third chances as well, but they're not allowing their opponents to be able to get a lot of second and third chances as well. And then on the Creighton side of things, the team has been stuck in the mud with their offense. Overall, they're about 99th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but you take a look at games in a road or neutral court environment outside the top 235 with that regard, and they just haven't found that primary scorer. Like, you've right now got 6 different guys that have given you at least 8 points per game, and I do like the fact that Creighton has a lot more depth than they've had in past years. Even someone like an Isaac Trout, who's only giving you about 5.5 points per game, he's making an impact, shooting 41% from 3. Hudson Greer has been able to shoot 46% from the outside, but he's been banged up all season long. And then you got Josh Dix, Blake Harper combining for about 23 points per game, and between the two of them, they do shoot about 36% from 3-point range, and it's a Creighton team that's still not awful on the glass. They've been a top 150 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They're giving up way too many second chances, so they're outside the top 3 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, and this is still a Creighton team that's not going to press the issue outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So nice clean possessions here for Nebraska. I do think that Nebraska is going to do a solid job of forcing a few turnovers on Creighton, who's been turning the ball over about 12 times per game. So really trying to find their bearings in terms of who that main point guard, whether that be Dix or Nick Graves, is going to be. And I think that Nebraska keeps this relatively low scoring in a game in which you've got a pair of teams that are not really going to push a ton of tempo. With Creighton, they've been having a lot of different tempos over the last few seasons in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they're checking in just 257th in all of college basketball. You've got a Nebraska team that's relatively mid-tempo, about 90th in the country. So I did set a total here of a 147.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 with Nebraska. 797, 798 on the card. UNC North Carolina plays host to Georgetown, and the Hoyas do find themselves as an 11.5 point underdog. 150 to 150.5 is a total. A little bit disrespectful here to Georgetown. I set them as an 8.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. North Carolina, rock solid win over Kentucky, which is right now aging like melting ice cream because, man, that Kentucky team, not great to say the least right now, but for North Carolina, even without Seth Trimble, they've been pretty solid in the backcourt. You've been able to have Kion Evans get a little bit of help from the international man of mystery and Luka Bragovic. Bragovic has been able to give you 12 points, 3.5 assists per game. At Evans, he's been able to give you 4 assists, 7 points per game. He's doing a solid job at the point guard spot. I thought that he had a large responsibility coming over from Colorado State and taking on this elevated role, and so far so good out of him. It's really been about the big men, though, for this North Carolina team. They are back with their rebounding. Caleb Wilson, double-double machine, 19 points, 10 boards, but he also throws in their 2.5 assists, a block, 2 steals per game, and then Henry Vassar shooting 40% from 3, 16 points, 8.5 boards, block and half per contest. Do like what he's able to bring to the table. Heck, even Jonathan Boom Boom Powell is able to come in off the bench. He's able to give you some nice size, but for North Carolina, they're never really going to force the issue in terms of generating turnovers. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, to their credit, they've been really good in terms of their interior defense, a top 10 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but you do have a Georgetown team that they themselves have been able to do a nice job on the glass. They've been a top 100 team in terms of their rebound percentage, as you've got Caleb Williams giving you 12 points, 6 boards. He's been able to shoot about 40% from 3, and then the Mac attack, Malik Mack and KJ Johnson. Both of these guys give you about 16.5 points per game, 8 assists to about 4.5 turnovers per game between the two of them, and they're generating between the two of them darn near 4 steals per game as well, so love the versatility there. Deshaun Harris-Smith has been a little bit of a disappointment and has been dealing with injuries, so that's been a little bit of an issue, but Vincent Ayuchuku, he's a true 7-footer, only give you about 4 boards per contest, but he has been able to give you multiple blocks per game. Julius Halafana has been able to give you about 5 rebounds. He provides some size as well, and for this Georgetown team, they themselves have been a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Their kryptonite has been guarding the 3-point line. They've been outside the top 275 with that regard, but Georgetown is just running good, clean offense, top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and even though you've got a North Carolina team that has slowed themselves down a little bit, and Georgetown is a relatively mid-tempo team themselves for North Carolina in terms of total possessions per game. They're about 148th in the country. I think that both of these teams just have a bunch of good, clean possessions, so set a total 154.5. I do like the over and the points here with Georgetown, 789, 800 on the card. SMU and Texas A&M, they do battle from College Park Center, and right now with SMU, they are a 2.5 point favorite to a 2-point underdog. We are seeing a flip of favorites here, and I'm seeing a pick 'em out there as well. 162 to 162.5 is the total, but I said SMU is a 3.5 point favorite, so whether they're a small favorite or a small underdog, I'm going to be in on this SMU team. You got a Texas A&M team that is very much in transition, and they're doing a great job in terms of generating turnovers. Top 25 team in the country in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis, but they do gamble for turnovers. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Now, Mackenzie Mbakpo has been able to breathe some life into the team, shooting 40% per 3, 9 points per game, and the team as a whole shoots 38% from the outside, but Pop Isaacs just has not been able to find his footing with this offense, about 8.5 points per game. He's been a bit of a disappointment. You don't necessarily have that one true facilitator as Rylan Griffin, along with Josh Holloway and Jakari Lane, are all giving you 3.3 assists per game, so they've been mixing and matching with that regard, and this is a Texas A&M team that is outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well, and while SMU has a lot of great guard play, headlined by Kevin Miller, I refuse to call him Boopy on this podcast, but Kevin Miller has been able to give you over 18 points per game. He's been shooting it well from 3. He's throwing out 7 assists per game. It is a team that they do a relatively solid job on the inside as well. This is a SMU team that is a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage, with Samat Yedoglu give you about 11.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Corey Washington, 13.5 points, 7 boards. BJ Edwards, do-it-all player, 5 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, 13.5 points. He's only shooting about 30% from 3-point range, but then you've got Jermaine O'Neal Jr. actually shooting 44% from the outside. He's been able to give the team 5 points per game. You've got versatility out of Sam Walters, but he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, and he's probably going to be not good to go in this game. And for SMU, top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and their line teams only shoot about 29% from 3-point range. I do think that SMU finds a way to be able to get the job done here. It's an SMU team that has been pushing things very much to the outside, and for Texas A&M, I think that they're going to have a little bit of a tough time with the perimeter defense of SMU, so I just said SMU is a 3.5 point favorite, whether they're a small favorite or a small underdog. Going to back them. I do think that you get very much an up and down game here. I set my total at a 167.5. You've got a Texas A&M team that has been playing at one of the more rapid paces in all of college basketball. They're currently 38th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and SMU 22nd in terms of total possessions per game. So like that over, and I'm blown away up to 3 with SMU 801, 802 on the card. Wright St, they play as a UW Green Bay. UW Green Bay is a underdog of 6.5 to 7 points. 141 to 141.5 is the total, and I did set a line of 8.5. I'm going to be blown away with Wright State. Wright State has been a team that typically has been a really good offensive team with no defense whatsoever. All of a sudden, this Wright State team has been turning over a little bit of a new leaf. Now, I will give Green Bay a little bit of credit. The offense has looked much better for them recently. They've climbed up into the top 215 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They have broken the 75-point barrier in each of their last 4 games, but this is a Wright State team that, after for the longest time under Scott Nagy, they'd be either a mid-tempo team or an up-tempo team. They've decided that they're going to put the brakes on a little bit more. Wright State right now about 192nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a UW Green Bay team that serves the total possessions per game. They're only about 323rd, but in Green Bay games, you get a lot of clean possessions because Green Bay is a top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, committed on offense, but outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers on defense. You've got a Wright State team though that they're a top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense. And Wright State, they're aligned teams who shoot less than 30% from 3. They themselves, top 100 team, shooting 37% from the outside with Michael Cooper leading the way, 13.5 points, 40% three-point shooter. As a freshman, he's been incredible. Michael Emarajbe has been a returner from a year ago. He's been able to give you 11 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Logan Woods hasn't even necessarily gotten it going yet, but he's still giving you 6 points and 40% three-point shooting. And then on the other side of things, Green Bay does have Max Hall back out there on the floor. He was missing towards the back half of their Virgin Islands tournament, and he's their top scorer, give you 59 points, 5 boards, but that's a place where UW Green Bay can be hurt. This team is not very good on the glass or outside the top 200 in terms of rebound percentage, and they just don't give themselves second and third chances. UW Green Bay outside the top 330 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but they're a top 150 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, and you've been able to get quite a bit out of Justin Allen along C.J. O'Hara. Both of these guys between 12.5 and 13 points per game, really not lighting it up from three. And Green Bay should see a little bit of positivity with their 30.6% three-point shooter, Preston Rudinger. He's back from a season ago. He's right now giving you 11 points, 4.5 assists. He's shooting over 40% for three, but outside of he and Caden Wilkins, not necessarily a ton from the outside, but I do think that for UW Green Bay, they're playing much more respectable basketball than they were even just a few weeks ago. But in the end, I do think that Wright St going to be able to keep their possessions clean, exploit a Green Bay team that still has their warts with regards to their defense, especially being outside the top 250 in terms of 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over, so I told 144.5 and willing to lay up to 8 here with Wright State. 803, 804 on the card. It is CCU on the road against North Texas. North Texas, a 7.5 to an 8.5 point dog. 132.5 to a 133 is the total, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 132. North Texas, once again, playing very slowly. They are outside the top 320 in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a TCU team that they're not necessarily going to be playing like super duper fast, but at the same time, they're going to play at a little bit more of a brisk pace, right around about 87th in terms of total possessions per game. A little bit of a byproduct of playing some of the teams like Florida and Wisconsin, but still a relatively mid-tempo team for North Texas. They're right now dealing with Milt McClendon being out for the season. That's rough for this offense, and they have fallen outside the top 180 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do shoot 36.5% from three, but with how slowly they play, they're outside the top 250 in terms of their ball security. Turn the ball over darn near 13 times per game. They also shoot right around about 300th in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. It's been all up to just Sean Stevenson, who's been able to give you about 17 points, pair of assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three, and then David Terrell. He's come in, he's been able to give the team about 11 points per game after he was rock solid over at UTEP, but for this North Texas team as well, they have fallen outside the top 80 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis because they're fouling a ton. They are outside the top 320 in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. They're honestly not bad with their interior defense. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but now they go up against a TCU team that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of running good, clean offense through Bach Harding, who's been able to give you 3 steals, 6.5 assists, 7.5 points per game. He's not necessarily your go-to scorer, but Jaden Pierre, he's shooting 46% for 3, 12.5 points per game. Micah Robinson is shooting 41% for 3. He's giving you about 10.5 points per contest. And for the CCU team, they do a really nice job on the glass with David Punch, giving you that punch down low, 7 boards, 2 blocks, 13.5 points per game. And TCU, top 15 team in the country in terms of generating turnovers. I think that they're going to be able to exploit a North Texas team that's a little bit vulnerable in the backcourt and be able to get the job done with those turnovers. I set my line at 12. I'm going to be willing to lay with TCU, and I'm in on the underside. I told 132, 805, 806 on the card. Cornell, they are on the road facing off against Samford, and Sam Amford is a 1.5 point underdog. The odds came between 165.5 to a 166.5, and for Cornell, I set them as 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, Cornell is a top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, and Samford, in year number 1 under Lenny Acuff, it still feels like they're trying to find their identity. Very mid-tempo team, about 174th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and to the credit of Samford, they do a nice job running clean offense. They're in the top 45 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, outside the top 315 in terms of generating turnovers, and that's a kryptonite for Cornell. Cornell's been turning the ball over 14 times per game. They're shooting 41.3% from 3, though, with over 51% of their field goal attempts coming from 3. This is a Samford squad that has been a little bit suspect with regards to perimeter play, and I think that they're going to have a tough time going against Adam Sang Hinton along with Cooper Norad, who will be able to combine for about 34.5 points per game, and Sang Hinton is right now hitting it hard. 48% 3-point shooting. Jake Feigen has been dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he has returned in the last 3 games, and he has been able to give the team 18 plus points in each of the last 2, so it looks like he's back up and running. And then you've got a Cornell team that's a little bit more respectable on the glass than they have been in past years. They're still outside the top 3 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they're not allowing teams to grab a lot of second and third chances. A lot of that is thanks to Casper Sepp, who comes over from Valparaiso, give you 6.5 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. Do like the overall game there. And then for Samford, you do have Dylan Faulkner, who came on over with Lenny Acuff from Lipscomb, and he's been able to make a nice impact down low. 14.5 points, 6 boards, not a guy that's really going to light it up from 3. And Samford is shooting just 30% from 3, but For Samford, they're allowing teams to shoot 39.4% from three. That's outside the top 330 in all of college basketball. Should that get a little bit better? Sure, but this is not a great perimeter defense. The backcourt is leaving something to be desired. They bring in the Norrises. Cade Norris, about 8 points, 4 boards per contest. Keaton Norris has been a do-it-all guy, 11 points, about 5 assists, 4.5 boards, but he's only shooting about 28.5% from three-point. Samford, I think, gets a little bit of positivity with their shooting, as right now they're outside the top 320 in their two-point shooting percentage, outside the top 250 in their three-point shooting percentage, outside the top 300 in terms of their free throw shooting percentage, but not turning the ball over, so that's good. But that said, I do think that Cornell, with their overall outside shooting, they get the job done here. Set my total at a 166.5, so you're at the 166, 165.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay with Cornell. Last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, it's 807, 808. UTEP is on the road against Seattle, and Seattle is a favorite of 11 to 11.5 points. So last game, it is 133 to 133.5, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with UTEP. I did set them as a underdog of 9.5 points. This is a Seattle team that's looking to push a little bit more tempo than they have in the past. They're about 209th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They've been slowing down a little bit more in the last few games, and this is a UTEP team that they always pride themselves on good defensive play and just really keeping things in control. They're about 275th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now with this UTEP team, they very nearly lost to a Division III school in St. Thomas. They needed a buzzer beater in regulation to be able to go to overtime, so that's not great. They've looked a little bit better recently, but I mean, it is a UTEP team that has really been stuck in the mud in terms of their offense. I mean, you take a look at their games against Division I competition, they have not been able to break the 65-point barrier all season long, but I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more going forward, as Elijah Jones has been rock solid with about 14 points, 4.5 boards. He's one of the main guys that returned from his season ago, and then they bring in Kasim Watson from Delaware State, Jamal West, who comes over from Nichols, and these two guys have good versatility. They both give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. It's a UTEP team that never has been and never really will be great on the glass. UTEP are right now one of the worst rebound rate teams in all of college basketball, but I do suspect that 30.4% three-point shooting will be going northward, and UTEP back in the top 50 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, which can lead to a lot of good fast break opportunities, and UTEP not afraid to put you on the free throw line. They're a top 50 team in terms of fouls committed on a per possession basis. With Seattle, this team has been much better with their three-point shooting than they were a season ago. Do think that we might see a little bit of regression, though, with that 39% three-point shooting, as you've got Will Humbert along with Brady Maldonado combining for about 31.5 points per game. And between the two of them, they're shooting over 48% from three-point range, with Humbert being able to give you about 3 blocks per contest. This is a Seattle team that they themselves have been very good in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 45 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but a little bit vulnerable from the outside the top 150 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And this is not a Seattle team that's necessarily been locking it down on the glass, as they're only grabbing about 9 offensive rebounds per game. They're outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, though I really do like what John Succhio, the transfer from Gonzaga, has been able to provide. About 6'8", shooting 39.5% from three, 13 points per contest. But I do think that with this UTEP team, they're going to do a nice job in terms of guarding from the perimeter. I think that they themselves heat up a little bit more from three-point range. I set my line at 9.5, so at a 10+, we'll take the points with UTEP, and I'm in on this total over as well. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. It is Navy playing us Air Force, and Air Force is an underdog of 9.5 points. Total on this game, it is 136.5, and I did set my total here at a 135. I'm going to be in on the under. Air Force still not a super duper up-tempo team. Their numbers are still warped by playing a game against IU Indy a little bit earlier in the season, about 269th in terms of total possessions per game. Navy not a team that's necessarily looking to bust it down the floor either. 284th in terms of total possessions per game. Did set my line at 9. I think the Air Force has just enough to hold in there. Navy has been solid in a lot of things. They haven't necessarily been great in one thing, though, and for this Air Force team, typically they're a really good three-point shooting team. They're only shooting about 32.5% from the outside this season, but much more balanced than in the past. In the past, they've been having like one guy give you 15 points per game, and everyone else has just been an afterthought. Now you've got Eli Robinson, Caleb Walker, Lucas Hobbin, and Cam Sanders all give between 11 to 13 points per game. Robinson has actually been able to shoot 46% from three-point range, and for Air Force, typically a team that just gets absolutely railroaded on the glass. They've been a little bit better this year. They're inside the top 300 in terms of their rebound percentage, and for this Air Force team, they've been okay with regards to perimeter defense. Now they are outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, and that's where Navy should be able to exploit them, especially having Aiden Koe, a 6'10" big man, give you 12.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, and then Don Draper at 6'5". He just does a little bit of everything. I mean, you don't necessarily have madmen going on here, but 7 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals. So I really like his overall game. It's a Navy team that they're hit or miss with regards to their offense. They're outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they've also been a top 200 team in terms of generating turnovers. They should have a nice advantage here on the glass, but I do think that Air Force in a slow and controlled game is going to be able to do just enough to hold there and there, especially with Navy being right around about 200th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Do like that Awesome Benjini has been able to give this Navy team about 16 points per game, and then you've got Michael Woods, who has stepped up with about 9.5 points per contest, but with Air Force being a little bit more versatile and well-rounded, I do think that they hold in there in a lower scoring game. Semi-total 135. I like the points with Air Force, and with the total, I'm in on the under 306, 503, 306, 504. Northeastern is playing us to Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut, an underdog of 3.5 points with a total of 140, and I like the points here with Central Connecticut. I did set them as a underdog of 2.5 points with Northeastern. Just a little bit of a wobbly team this season. They did lose a lot of their top scorers from a year ago, and typically when Northeastern teams have been at their best, they've been a top 100 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, and they are outside the top 200 right now with that regard. Now, they're not allowing a lot of second and third chances, top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they've been really relying upon Xander O'Leary to be able to give them some rebounding, about 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. One of just two guys on the roster can give you over 4 rebounds per game with Yori Fritz at about 6'8", 6'9", give you about 13 points, 6 boards per contest, and L.A. Pratt has been the top scorer for the team, but he's only played in 3 games this season. He's right now dealing with a little bit of an injury, so you've got a lot of mixing pieces in the backcourt with Xavier Abreu stepping up in the backcourt, give you about 10.5 points per game for a unit that only shoots about 30% from 3-point range, and they've been outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. Now, what Northeastern is doing a nice job of is generating turnovers. They've been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is a Northeastern team that typically they're a little bit more of a controlled team. They're about 170th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they spend themselves up a little bit. Central Connecticut more around about 212th in terms of total possessions per game, but Central Connecticut is like going to the dentist. They do not give you anything easy. They're a top 15 team in terms of not allowing free throws on a per possession basis. They've done a good job on the glass, top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Darren Smith Jr. last year shot over 40% from 3. He's now shooting 39.5% from 3. He's supplying the team with 20.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest. Max Frazier, he's been able to step in. He's been able to give the team about 7.5 rebounds per game. James Jones, no Earl, about 7.8 boards, 5.5 points per game. You just have a lot of guys that are mixing and matching. Melo Sanchez, who was really good a few seasons ago over at Hawaii Pacific. Yes, the same Hawaii Pacific that knocked off Boise State. He's shooting 44% from 3-point. You've got a lot of nice outside shooting with this team. They're shooting 39% from 3-point. Middle of the road in terms of guarding the 3-point line, but I really like the way that this team takes care of the ball with about 11 turnovers per game. I do think that this is going to be more of a control game with Northeastern still dealing with ailments in the backcourt, so I did set my line at 2.5. We'll take the points here at Central Connecticut in on the under as well. 306, 505, 306, 506. Florida Gulf Coast is going to be playing us a Florida Atlantic, and Florida Atlantic is a road favorite to 2 points. 154 is the total, and I did set a total here of a 148.5. I'm in on the under. You've got a Florida Atlantic team that's really slowed themselves down from previous years, and you've got a Florida Gulf Coast team that's really sped themselves up from previous years. Right now for Florida Atlantic, 287th in terms of total possessions per game. Florida Gulf Coast is 21st, and I don't understand why Florida Gulf Coast has sped themselves up as much as they have. Now, Florida Gulf Coast is doing a really nice job in terms of grabbing second and third chances. This team is in the top 25 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they've been able to do a great job with that regard, as you've been able to get in the neighborhood of about 7 rebounds, 17 points per game, and 2 steals. J.R. Kozinski, who began his career over at Notre Dame, and he's shooting about 39% from 3-point range, and then Jordan Ellerby, he's eating good in the neighborhood, shooting 42% for 3. He's been able to give you 16 points per game, and then it's a lot of just mix and match in terms of the rebounding, as Isaiah Malone has been able to give you about 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. I was expecting a little bit more Tristan Gullett, who he was seeing some good minutes out there in the CBI last season, but only about 3 points, 3 rebounds per game. And for this Florida Gulf Coast team, they've been leaving something to be desired in terms of their guard play. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and though this team does a great job on the glass, they're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and you've got a Florida Atlantic team that has been pretty efficient in terms of their offense. They're pretty inefficient with regards to their defense, as last year they were one of the worst 3-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball. They're in the bottom 10 this year. They're allowing teams to shoot over 41% for 3. We should see a little bit of positivity there, but they just don't do a good job of guarding the 3-point line, but they themselves have been a top top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage, as you've got Devin Vanderpool, who's been versatile with about 16 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, 7.5 boards, shooting 35.5% from 3. You never know what you're going to get out of Kane Carlisle. He's a 15.5 points per game, but this guy can shoot you in or out of a game. But you do know that Devin Williams is going to be rock solid down low. 5 boards, 3 blocks, 7 points per game. And when it comes to Vincent Nuremberger, he's been a little bit banged up, but he's been able to give you a bit of versatility as a big man as well. Maximum Logue, he's been able to give you about 3 boards per contest as well. You've got a lot of size on this team. It is a Florida Atlantic team that gives up their looks from the outside, but on the inside, they're pretty rock solid, and I do think that allows them to do just enough to be able to get the job done here. I did set Florida Atlantic as a 2.5 point favorite, and with Florida Gulf Coast on SC being a team that hoists it up from 3, I think you get a lower scoring game, so I'm going to be in on the under semi-total 148.5, and I do like Florida Atlantic laying up to 2, 306.507, 306.508. Austin Peay is on the road against UT Rio Grande Valley, the Vaqueros of UT Rio Grande Valley, and a pick'em game / a 1 point favorite, 158.5 to 151 is the total, and for Grand Valley, I set them as a 2 point dog. I like Austin Peay on the money line. With this Austin Peay squad, they become a more mid-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game, but they're a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. With this Austin Peay squad, you've been able to get a lot of production out of Tate McCubbin along with Anton Bookshire, who are back from season ago, with McCubbin being able to give you 13.6 boards, 2.5 assists, 6'7", do-it-all player that's shooting 37.5% from 3, and the 3-point shooting is really picking up, with Colin Parker being the main reason why. He has come up from the non-D1 ranks at 6'8". He's been able to give you 48.5% 3-point shooting, 17 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. He has been absolutely magnificent. And now you've got Rashad Marshall, who got off to a little bit of a slow start this season, doing a better job on the glass, giving you about 5.5 boards, 9.5 points per game. Comes on over from Arkansas State. This is a Austin Peay team that does a nice job in terms of not allowing anything easy from the perimeter, as their line teams are shoot less than 31% from 3, and they're a top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And for this Rio Grande Valley team, it's been a, shall we say, a little bit more a hit or miss team in terms of their offense, as they've got a lot of moving pieces with losing the likes of Howie Fleming and company, and they've had to replace them with Marvin McGee, who comes over from the Meep Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners, and Corey Cotton from Jacksonville State. These guys have been your main men, providing about 23.5 points per game, and McGee is shooting 43% from 3-point range, and the turnovers have actually gone way down for Grand Valley. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per game. They're shooting 41.3% from 3. That is going to be going southward very, very quickly. They're outside the top 200 in terms of their rebound percentage as well, and they've just not been able to punch the ball inside. And for Grand Valley, this is always a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and being about 300th in the country with that regard, that's a little bit of an issue, though. You do have Filip Brakovic, who has come over from Serbia, and he's been able to give the team about 9 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. I do like his overall game, but in the end, I do think that this is going to be a Austin Peay team that does a nice job being able to generate some turnovers with this UT Rio Grande Valley team. It still feels like they're still trying to find that main facilitator, and I do think that allows Austin Peay to go on the road, get the job done, and really get this game played at their own tempo, as well as you've got a Grand Valley team that typically they look to play quite a bit more up-tempo. They've been playing a little bit more slowly this year, though. Grand Valley, about 140th in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 146. I like the under, and Austin Peay on the money line, 36.509, 36.510. Radford is playing as St. Francis, Pennsylvania. St. Francis is a underdog here of 12 to 11 points. 152 is the total line. Set a total of 153.5. I do like the over. For St. Francis, they had a little bit of a coaching regime change in the offseason, and that has led to them cranking up their tempo a little bit more in terms of total possessions per game. St. Francis, Pennsylvania, checking in about 51st in all of college basketball. And Zachary Chu, who comes on up from the NBA ranks 33rd in the country, is how he has Radford playing in terms of total possessions per game. And for Radford, they did bring in a pair of guards from the ACC to really be able to elevate this offense, as you've got Dennis Parker, who began his career over at NC State, 16.5 points, 5.5 boards. He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Del Jones has not really gotten it going from the outside, but comes in from Clemson, 3 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, 15.5 points per game. Outside of that, it's been a little bit more mix and match. I like what Tyson Brown brings to the table down low. Comes on over from the Sun Belt, 6.5 points, 6.5 boards, so he's been pretty sturdy there, but Radford as a whole, only shooting about 30.5% from 3-point. Top 100 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're also giving it up from the outside. Their line teams to shoot 36% from 3-point, but this is the St. Francis of Pennsylvania team that they themselves have had their massive defensive warts, as they've been a top 200 team in terms of turnover turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they really give it up outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and St. Francis outside the top 270 in terms of their overall 3-point shooting percentage. Sky Wicks has been rock solid, began his career at current at Word, 19 points, 8.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, and he's shooting about 36% from 3. And then Ahmad Harrison has come in. He's been able to shoot about 43% from 3-point range after he was a guy that just couldn't get out there on the floor last season over at Fordham. But that said, you've got a lot of mixing and matching in terms of this just overall rotation. It just feels like they haven't necessarily found their identity quite yet. And with the St. Francis, Pennsylvania team, they have been outside the top 225 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. And with this team outside the top 340 in terms of ball security, I do think that Radford is going to be able to generate some turnovers, turn that defense into offense. It's a Radford team that in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, a top 150 unit. So I did set Radford here as a favorite of 13.5 points. Willing to lay up to 13 with them. Do like the over, so my total 153.5. 365-11, 365-12. UT Martin plays us at Alabama State. Alabama State is a 4.5 point dog. 144 is the total. And I say UT Martin as an 11 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for this Alabama State team. They've been better than I was expecting them to be because they did lose their main guard in TJ Madlock. That's actually the son of Tony Madlock. And for Alabama State, it doesn't sound great, but 229th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis is not bad considering they've had to play a bunch of bye games. And that's on par with UT Martin. UT Martin is about 206th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The big thing for UT Martin, taking care of the ball. They're right now outside the top 350 in terms of ball security, and they do face off against an Alabama State team that has been solid in generating turnovers. Top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they leave themselves very vulnerable when they don't generate a turnover. For Alabama State, outside the top 250 in opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now for Alabama State, they've actually been a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. You've been able to get a lot down low out of Rashawn King, who's been able to give you about 7.5 points. He's pulling in there over 2 offensive rebounds per game, and then you've got Cam Polisi and then Jarquiz Stanbach, who have both been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. Stanback has been able to give you about 2.3 blocks per contest as well. But the team is still without J. Stephen Walker as well. At 6'10", he was able to give them some relatively good size. And for this UT Martin team, they have done an exceptional job in terms of generating turnovers, and that's the biggest issue that you've got from a season ago with this Alabama State team. Last year, they were a top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. This year, they're outside the top 200 in terms of ball security with about 13 turnovers per game. And UT Martin, while they turn the ball over a ton, they're a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And teams are shooting just 26% from 3 against them. I think that goes a little bit northward, but just so much size with all these guys being like 6'5" to 6'8". In the case of Mateus Denises, he's actually saying 6'9", 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, freshman that comes in from Lithuania. But you've got a ton of size around the perimeter. You've got Filip Petrovic, who he's a freshman that comes in from Slovenia. He's been able to give you 3.5 assists per game. It's just the international men of mystery. You've got guys from like 12 different countries, and then you've got Ty Price, who right now rides the bench for this team. But still, you've been able to have someone like Dragus Langu, who's been able to give you about 14 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists per game. And then Andrea Brajkovic, he's been able to give you about 15.5 points per game. You can tell I'm struggling with some of those names, but I do think that for UT Martin, that overall size around the perimeter, even though they turn the ball over a lot, their ability to be able to generate turnovers is going to be able to win out and get the job done. I like UT Martin here. I set them as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number and made my total 149. I'm also in on the over 306-513, 306-514. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin plays us at Louisiana Monroe. Monroe is an underdog of 20 points. 141.5 is a total, and I set Monroe as an underdog of 17 points. I'm going to be one to take the points. Stephen F. Austin turning over a little bit of a new leaf. They used to be a team that would just generate a whole bunch of turnovers. Now they're outside the top 140 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they've been much stronger on the glass. That's just what happens when you have a coaching change right now with our good friend Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin. In terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in as a little bit more of a mid-tier team at 238th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Louisiana Monroe, they're about 176th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, as you've got Phil Cunningham. He was the coach many years ago over at Troy, taking over the program. And for this Louisiana Monroe team, they certainly have had their issues down low, but I do think that they are going to be able to get a little bit more in the backcourt out of Matavius Russell, who's giving you 17 points per game, began his career over at Mississippi State. It's a unit that has been outside the top 340, as a matter of fact, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but I mean, they've been respectable in terms of guarding the three-point line. You've been able to get good production out of Renas Soders along with Christian Lewis. These two guys are combining for about 25 points per game, and Saunders has been able to shoot about 38.5% from three-point range. Dylan Diaz has been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3. He's giving out 3 assists per game, and then on the other end for Stephen F. Austin, it's been all about what you've been able to get out of the main holdovers from a season ago. It's Krishan Christmas. It always feels like Christmas when he's out there. He's been able to supply the team with about 6.5 boards, 2 assists, 7 points per game, 6'5" versatile piece. Keon Thompson has been that main scorer of 17.5 points per game. It's a Stephen F. Austin team that has much improved with their three-point shooting from a season ago, with Narachikovic along with Cam Burton both shooting over 46% from three, with Burton only about 8 points per game. Kid Ivanic, hopefully we got it right the second time, has been able to give you about 12.5 points per game. And then Jared Colonna, 4 blocks per contest. That's a top 5 mark in all of college basketball, but this team still really struggles at the free throw line. They shoot 63% of the free throw line. They're outside the top 250 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. Now, to their credit, this team has run teams off the three-point line. They are a top 10 team in terms of fewest percentage of opponent shots that come from three-point range, so they're pile driving things inside because this is a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. And for Stephen F. Austin, even though they're not generating turnovers, they're taking care of the ball themselves. They've been only turning the ball for about 10 times per game. That's a top 80 mark in terms of taking care of the ball. So I think that those clean possessions lead to an over. I set my total at a 147, but with this Louisiana Monroe team, set them as a 17-point dog. I'm going to be willing to take those points. 306-515, 306-516. Southeast Louisiana is playing those to Northwestern St. Northwestern St, underdog of 7 to 8 points. 137 is the total, and set a total of a 136. I'm going to be in on the under. You've got a pair of teams that are really not looking to push a lot of tempo, especially Southeast Louisiana. Over the last few seasons, they've been one of the slower teams in all of college basketball, and they're finding themselves 303rd in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and Northwestern State is 262nd, but with Northwestern State, this unit has been one of the worst teams in all of college basketball on the glass as far as this season, but getting back Willie Williams, I think, is just so paramount for this team. He's only been able to play in 2 games, 6.7 rebounds per game in those 2 games last year. He was giving the team 6+ rebounds per game. He's going to be able to give this team a little bit of rough and tumble, as right now he is the lone guy on the roster. Let's give you over 4 rebounds per game. You've had Micah Thomas do a nice job as that main headline scorer, 16 points, pair of assists, shooting 47% from 3 for a Northwestern State team that overall is shooting 43.5% from 3. Now they're allowing teams to shoot 42% from 3. That is a bottom 5 mark in all of college basketball, but you don't have a Southeast Louisiana team that necessarily goes into flamethrower mode from 3-point range. I did set Southeast Louisiana as only a 2-point favorite. As a result, I'm going to be willing to take the points because I do think that with Northwestern State, their current bottom 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, that does go northward with the return of Williams, and you've got a Southeast Louisiana team that they themselves are poultry with regards to their offense. They're shooting 25% from 3, so you got one of the worst 3-point shooting teams going up against one of the worst 3-point shooting defenses in the country. It's a good old situation of something's got to give. Southeast Louisiana, a bottom 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball, 14 turnovers per game, but a top 75 team in terms of generating turnovers. They are forcing about 15 turnovers per game. To the credit of Southeast Louisiana, they're a top 125 team in terms of not allowing second and third chances on the glass, and you've got a quartet of guys giving you between 8.8 and 10.6 points per game. Isaiah Gaines, Seth Jones, Jeremiah Elise, along with Jalen Forrest. None of these guys have really busted out, though. You've only got one player on the roster other than CJ Booker, who's really not taking a lot of threes. Man, shooting above 30% from 3-point range, and Makai Miles, he's actually shot 46% from 3-point range, but once again, on very low volume thus far. So I do think that with Southeast Louisiana, they do just enough to be able to get the job done because this is a very rock-solid defense, especially with regards to guarding the perimeter, but their own perimeter offense, I think, cost them in this game. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring slog, even with some late game fouling. Did set a total of a 136. I'm going to be in on the under of Northwestern State. I think that Willie Williams makes a big impact. I'm willing to take those points. 306-517, 306-518. Lipscomb plays us Alabama A&M. A&M is an underdog of 9 points. So on this game, it is 142, and I did set Alabama A&M as a 13.5-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with Lipscomb. With Lipscomb, it does feel like they're really finding their footing as they had a coaching change in the offseason. You lose Lenny Acuff, and Kevin Carroll, who was a very successful Division II coach, takes over, and the 3-point shooting has been pretty solid for Lipscomb. They're shooting 34% from 3 with a lot of size. Grant Asman, someone that's saying 6'10", 43% 3-point shooter, 13.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. One of the other main holdovers in Charlie Williams, 8.5 points. He's able to pop it from 3 at about 6'10". He's supplying the team with a pair of assists per game. But then you've got Mateo Esmeraldo, who's been able to give you 6.5 assists and 1.7 turnovers per game. It is a Lipscomb team that they have been turning the ball over themselves a little bit more than what you'd like outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, but top 75 unit in terms of generating turnovers themselves. It is a Lipscomb team that has been outside the top 200 in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but Alabama A&M has been outside the top 300 with that regard, and Alabama A&M, they're looking to take on a little bit of a new style as well as Dante Jackson, the former Grambling coach, takes over, and he's brought with him a lot of his guys, including top scorer Katavia Dozier, 14.5 points. He's been shooting from 3-point range, only about 31.5% from 3, but then you got James Graham, who comes over, along James Flippin. Flippin only about 4 points per game. You expect a little bit more there, but Graham has been an impact guy, 8 points, 4 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but that typical strong Grambling defense has really not been there on the inside. They're outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves are outside the top 345 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and this team is getting wrecked on the glass. They're outside the top 300 in terms of rebound percentage. They're outside the top 200 in terms of ball security as well. It's a Lipscomb team that, with their new style, they're not necessarily looking to gun it, but at the same time, they're still quite fast. They're about 62nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Going to be an interesting little bit of a tempo war. I'm just not sure if Alabama A&M is going to be able to do a nice job in terms of slowing down this Lipscomb team, and I do think that Lipscomb turns some of those turnovers into offense. Semi-line at 13.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Lipscomb, and I'm in on the over semi-total 145.5. 36-5-19, 36-5-20. Central Arkansas is on the road against East Texas A&M. East Texas A&M is a home underdog of 1.5 to 1 point, and your total is 140, and I did set Central Arkansas as the 1.5 point underdog. So with East Texas A&M, going to be willing to take them on the money line. Central Arkansas, by the way, a very improved team from 8 seasons ago. I mean, we saw them blow out Little Rock by 25 plus points. They were up like 30 points at the half in that game, and bringing back Cameron Hunter, who was really good for the program like 3 or so years ago, spent some time at Wisconsin and was banged up for a year. He's been the main man. He's been able to give you 15 points, pair of assists, a steal and upper contest for a Central Arkansas team that is really forming their identity on being a little bit of a tougher team with regards to their perimeter defense. They're now a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, top 175 team in terms of generating turnovers. Still a little bit weak on the inside, but they're not allowing second chances. They're a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with the main guy down low being Ty Robinson, 11.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. You've got Tremaine Byer, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game as well. Not a team that's going to light you up from 3. Central Arkansas is only shooting about 32% from 3-point, and they cast away from 3. They're taking more 3s than 2s right now, but I have an East Texas A&M team that last year they were just absolutely awful on offense. The East Texas A&M last year was outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and I'm not saying that these are offensive wizards by any stretch of the imagination, but they've been a top 175 team in terms of their 2-point and their 3-point shooting percentage, not reeling any sort of second chances. They're outside the top 300 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but bringing in G&I Hunt was very big. 7 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists. Like, this man is on his 5th different school. I have no idea he's got eligibility because he was on that Oregon State team that made the Elite 8 about a decade ago. I joke when I say a decade ago, but I'm really not joking. And then Rodney Harrison, who comes over from Tarleton, he's been the main scorer. About 14 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, with Hunt being a little bit more of that facilitator. Down low, you don't have a single guy that really gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but Michael Florian, who was over at St. Bonaventure last year, good size at 6'11", he's been able to give you about 5 boards per game, and it's an East Texas A&M team that all of a sudden now shooting 36% from 3-point share, a respectable 3-point shooting defense, and they're a top 200 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. And with this East Texas A&M team being a top 35 team in terms of generating turnovers, I think that that's just enough for them to be able to get the job done. So I have a Central Arkansas team that's in the top 125 in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 143.5, like the over and East Texas A&M on the money line, and wrap things up with 306-521, 306-522. Gonzaga plays us in North Florida. Mighty Osprey are 44-point underdogs still on this game. It is 167 and set a total of 165.5. I'm going to be in on the under with this Gonzaga team. They're clearly the better team here. They're in the top 30 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. So the defense has actually been a little bit more efficient than the offense thus far this season. But you do have a North Florida team that's shooting over 38% from 3-point range away from home. Gonzaga has been masterful at guarding the 3-point line. 26.9% is what opponents shoot against them. I think there should be a regression with both. North Florida not going to continue to shoot over 38% from 3-point range away from home. Gonzaga not going to continue to allow opponents to shoot only 27% from 3, but I do think that this number has gone a little bit too drastic. Now, North Florida is allowing opponents to grab over 45% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Graham Ike is going to be eaten in this game. 16 points, 8 boards, 2.5 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Ty and Grant Foster is blowing their 6 boards to go with 11 points per game. Not a great 3-point shooter, though, and Gonzaga, they're about 163rd with their 3-point shooting at 33.8%. That's taken a little bit of a fall off, but his team certainly still one of the most efficient offenses in the country with the way that they pound the ball down low. And this is a Gonzaga team that has been a top 75 unit in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Do have a North Florida team that has been a little bit careless with the ball. They're turning the ball over 13.5 times per game, but I like what Cameron Oriole has been able to provide. 17.5 points, 4 assists, shooting 43% from 3-point range. Trey Caddy has been able to shoot 43% from 3 with his 10 points per game. BJ Plummer has been able to give you 9.5 points per game. And I mean, this team never has been one that has been great on the glass, but you do have of Dalton Gaiman along with Mason Lee, both giving you about 4.5 rebounds per game. It's on a team that's been absolutely awful in terms of grabbing second and third chances or just allowing their opponents to grab all of them. And this is obviously a team that's very fragile on the inside, but North Florida is allowing teams to shoot less than 33% from three-point range as well. I think that perimeter play is going to be just enough for North Florida to hold in there. North Florida looking to play quite up-tempo. They're a top 75 team once again in terms of total possessions per game. And you do have a Gonzaga team that they still play quite fast themselves. Gonzaga 46th in terms of total possessions per game, but Gonzaga must have improved on defense. So I set a total of 165.5, like the under, and I do like getting over 40 points with North Florida. And that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Superstar, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 for joining me in the last segment. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, give you guys picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I will be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you so much.